transmit light on the base radio was a red dot about the size of a ladybug, and the first time it came on by itself, I was standing close enough to touch it. Nobody had keyed the mic. I know that because my own hand was resting on the mic, flat, the way you rest a hand on a dog to feel it breathe, and my thumb was nowhere near the button. The light came on anyway. It held for the length of a slow breath, and then it went out, and the tower was quiet again except for the wind working at the shutters. That was in August. I want to go back before August, because the light coming on by itself is not where any of this starts. And told out of order, it sounds like the account of a man who went up that mountain looking for a ghost. I was not looking for a ghost. I was looking for a summer of quiet and a way to stop dreaming about my brother, and the district gave me both, in a manner of speaking. I took the Grayback job in the spring of 2019. Grayback Lookout sits at a little over 7,000 feet on the shoulder of Grayback Mountain in the Black Pine district of the Wapiti National Forest. And if you have never heard of any of those, it is because they are the kind of names that only mean something to the people who work them. The tower is a 14 by 14 glass box on stilts, a cab they call it, with a catwalk running all the way around, and a set of stairs switchbacking up the understructure. You can see 100 miles on a clear day. On a bad day, you cannot see the bottom of your own stairs. There is a propane fridge, and a propane cook stove, and a propane heater, a bunk, a stool, a hand crank weather station, and in the middle of the floor, on a wooden cabinet bolted down against the wind, the Osborne firefinder. That last thing is the whole reason the tower exists. It is a brass sighting ring on a map disc, and you use it to shoot a bearing on a smoke, and you call that bearing in on the radio, and somewhere a long way off, a person writes it down and crosses it with another lookout's bearing and puts an X on a map where a fire is starting to be born. That is the job. You watch. You call it in. Most of the time, nothing happens for weeks, and then everything happens in a single afternoon. I was 31 that spring. I had been a framer for 9 years, good with a nail gun and bad with money. And I had a bad shoulder from a fall off a second-story deck, and a habit of grinding my teeth in my sleep that 2 different girlfriends had left notes about on 2 different mornings. I am setting the small true things down first, so it is plain that I am a small true man. I am not the kind who sees signs. I read the weather off a barometer and a sky, not off my own nerves. The reason I applied is a thing I have to say plainly and then leave alone. My brother Danny worked a lookout in this same district. That was a long time before me. The summer of 2009, when he was 24 and I was 21, and he was the one our mother worried about less. Danny had the tower called Cutthroat Lookout out on the far west edge of the Black Pine, above a lake with the same name. He worked 2 seasons there. On a day off in the middle of his second season, he hiked down to Ptarmigan Lake, which is a backcountry lake a few miles from the Cutthroat Road, and he went swimming, and he did not come out. They found him 3 days later. The report said, cold water and a cramp in deep water, close to shore, which is the way it goes with those glacial lakes. Warm on top for a foot, and then a cold under it that takes your legs. He was a strong swimmer. That was the thing nobody in my family could make sit down and be quiet for years afterward. He was the strong swimmer. I was the one who never learned to float right. So when I say I took the Grayback job to stop dreaming about him, I mean the specific dream, which was Danny in the water with his face turned away from me and his arm up, not waving, just up, and me standing on a shore I could not get closer to, no matter how I ran. I had that dream a couple of times a month for 10 years. I thought if I went to the place where he had been happy, if I did the work he had done, I might trade that dream for something better. A memory of him laughing on a catwalk, maybe. That was the plan, as much as I had one. The man who trained me was named Hollis Pruitt. He was district then, and he was district still. A lean old man with a white Brusher mustache and hands like split cedar, and he had been the one to hire Danny all those years back. He knew who I was the minute I gave my last name. He did not make a thing of it. He looked at me a second longer than he needed to, and then he shook my hand and said, "We had a lot of ground to cover before the snow was off the road. We spent 3 days at Grayback getting me set up. Hollis taught me the fire finder and the weather codes and how to run the propane without gassing myself in my sleep. He taught me the radio last, and he took his time with it, and that was the part I remember best because of the way he changed while he was doing it. The radio is the whole nervous system of a lookout. You have a base station bolted to the wall, running off a solar bank and a bank of batteries, and you have a handheld, a Bendix King, that you carry on the catwalk so you are never out of touch. Everything runs on the district net, the fire net, and everybody on it has a call sign. Dispatch was Black Pine Dispatch. My call sign, because Grayback was the 9th active lookout in the district's old numbering, was Lookout 9. Hollis drilled me on it until I could say it in my sleep. When you have got traffic, you say who you are calling and then who you are. So a smoke report from me started Black Pine Dispatch, Lookout 9. You say it twice at the front so the person copying has time to grab a pencil. Little things like that. The grammar of the net. Then Hollis sat me down on the bunk and he said there was one more thing, and it was not in any manual. I remember he had his cap off and he was turning it in his hands. He said, "You do not answer the radio after midnight." I thought he meant a courtesy thing, that dispatch went home and nobody wanted to be raised at 2 in the morning over nothing. I said something like that. "Sure, keep it clear at night," and he shook his head slow, the way you do at a kid who has not understood you. He said, "I mean, if you hear traffic on the net after midnight, you log it and you leave it alone. You do not key back. Dispatch closes the net at 10. Between 10 at night and 6 in the morning, there is nobody on this net but the other lookouts, and the other lookouts are asleep, because their dispatch closed the net too. So if you hear a voice on that net in the dark, the first thing you do is you write down the time, and the second thing you do is you take your thumb off the button and you keep it off." I asked him what I would be hearing if there was nobody there. He put his cap back on. He said, "Skip. Atmospheric skip. On a clear cold night, a signal can bounce off the top of the air and come down 500 miles from where it started, and you will hear ranchers in another state and truckers and God knows who, faint, cutting in and out, and it will sound like it is right next to you. It is a radio trick and it means nothing, and it will scare a new man half to death if he is not ready for it. So I am readying you. You hear a voice at night. It is 100 miles of empty air talking to itself. You log it. You do not answer it." And that was a reasonable thing to say, and I believed all of it. I believed it completely, and that matters, because I did not go up that mountain primed to be afraid. Hollis gave me a rule, and a reason for the rule, and the reason was physics. I wrote the rule in the front of my log the way he told me to. Do not answer the net after midnight. I even underlined it, not because it scared me, but because Hollis had a way of watching you to see if you took a thing seriously, and I wanted him to see me take it seriously so he would leave and let me get on with my summer. He climbed down the stairs that afternoon and got in his green Forest Service truck and drove off down Forest Road 250, and I watched the dust of him until the road bent behind a ridge and there was no more dust. Then I was alone at 7,000 feet with 100 miles of country and a brass sighting ring and a rule I did not think about again for a month. The first weeks were the best weeks. I will not pretend otherwise. I woke up before the sun because the whole cab goes gold and then white when the light comes over the eastern peaks, and there is no way to sleep through it and no reason to want to. I did my morning weather at 9, cranking the little psychrometer and reading the wet bulb and the dry bulb and calling it in. I walked the catwalk with coffee, and I glassed the country for smokes. I got to know the shape of my district, the way you get to know a face, Grayback Mountain under me. The Sawtooth country to the north, all rock and snowfield. The green sink of the black pine drainage to the west, and past it, far off and low, the country where Cutthroat Lake sat, though I could not see the lake itself, and I was glad of that. I learned the other lookouts by their voices before I ever met one of them. That is a strange intimacy. The net. You spend a season hearing people breathe and clear their throats and call their weather, and you build a whole face for them that turns out to be wrong when you finally shake their hand at the end of the year. There was Lookout 4, a woman called Peg, on Signal Butte to the south, who had been doing it 30 years and had a voice like a cigarette that had learned to talk. There was Lookout 7, a college kid named Marcus, up on the Sawtooth side, who overtalked his reports and got gently ribbed for it. There was Lookout 2, an old boy I only ever knew as Estes, who called his weather at 9 on the dot every morning and never said a word more than the codes. And there was Black Pine Dispatch, which was usually Carol Ann, a woman with a headset and a coffee mug and a whole board of us to keep track of, and sometimes at shift change a younger man, Doyle, who rattled through the traffic faster than she did and made you ask for a repeat. That was my world. Those voices, and the wind, and the light. I called Danny's tower up on the district map one afternoon, out of a soreness I could not leave alone, and it was not on the active list. Cutthroat Lookout had been decommissioned. Hollis told me that later when I asked. He said they closed Cutthroat the year after Danny drowned. Not because of Danny, he said, though he did not quite look at me when he said it. Budget. They were closing towers all over the West in those years, putting up cameras and satellites, and Cutthroat was old and hard to supply, and the road washed out every other spring. So they pulled the radio and shuttered it and let it stand out there empty above the lake. Nobody had keyed a mic from Cutthroat in 10 years. That number is going to matter, and I did not know it yet, so I am setting it down plain the way it came to me, over the radio, on an ordinary afternoon, with Hollis's voice a little careful, and me not knowing to listen for the care. The first wrong thing was so small I did not write it down. That is the thing about the first wrong thing. You do not know it is the first of anything. You think it is the only one. It was the middle of July. A warm, dry night with a half moon, and I could not sleep because the propane heater ticked when it cooled, and I had not yet learned to sleep through the tick. I was lying on the bunk listening to it, the way you listen to a clock you wish would stop, when the base radio put out a single burst of squelch, just a crackle. The sound a radio makes when a signal opens the channel for a half second and then closes it. I looked at the clock. It was a little after 1 in the morning. I lay there and waited to see if it would come again, and after a minute it did, a longer crackle this time, and underneath the crackle there was the shape of a voice, not words. Just the up and down of a person talking, the music of it, buried under the static so far I could not have told you if it was a man or a woman. I thought of what Hollis said. Skip. Some rancher in Nevada raising his hired man, bouncing off the cold air and coming down on my mountain. I even smiled a little in the dark because it was exactly the thing he had promised, and here it was, harmless, 100 miles of empty air talking to itself. I did not get up. I did not log it, which I should have, but I was warm and half asleep, and it was nothing. The voice shape came twice more, further apart each time, fainter each time, and then it was gone, and the channel was clean, and I slept. In the morning it was hard to believe I had heard anything at all. That is the other thing about the first wrong thing. Daylight takes the weight off it. I did my 9 o'clock weather, and I heard Estes call his, and Carol Ann copy it, and everything was so ordinary and so much itself that the crackle in the night went where those things go, into the same drawer as a dream you cannot finish remembering. I did not think about it again for 4 days. Then it came back, and this time it had my call sign in it. It was near 2 in the morning, and I was awake, because a dry lightning cell was walking the far ridges to the west. No rain in it, just the flicker and the long grumble, and lightning is a lookout's real work. Dry lightning starts fires. You watch the strikes, and you mark where they hit, and you carry those spots in your head for a day or two after, because a lightning fire can smolder in a snag and do nothing and then stand up into a running fire on the third afternoon when the wind comes. So I was up at the window, counting the seconds between the flash and the roll when the base radio opened up. Lookout 9, it said. I want to be careful here about what I heard, because it matters, and because I have gone over it more times than is good for a man. The signal was clean. That was the first wrong thing, though I did not rank it as wrong in the moment. The July crackle had been buried in static, a voice shape under a river of noise. This was not that. This was a clear signal, close and dry and present, the way Carol Ann sounds at 9 in the morning when the net is strong. It said my call sign, Lookout 9, once, and then it waited. I stood there with my heart going, and I told myself it was Carol Ann. Some emergency. A fire somebody else had spotted near my sector. Dispatch opening the net in the middle of the night because that is what dispatch does when the country is burning. I actually reached for the mic. My hand was on it, and then the voice said it again. Lookout 9, it said. And then it said, you copy. It was not Carol Ann. It was not Doyle. It was a man's voice, and it was not any voice I had on the net. And here is the part I have never been able to make sound like anything but a crazy man talking. It said my call sign the way you say a thing you already know the answer to. There was no question in it. Dispatch calls you and waits to see if you are there. This voice was not waiting to see if I was there. It knew I was there. Lookout 9, you copy. Flat. The way you would say a name across a kitchen table to a person you can see. I took my hand off the mic. I do not fully know why. Hollis's rule was in me by then, the way a thing gets in you when you have written it in a log and looked at it every morning, but I do not think it was the rule. I think it was the flatness. I think some animal part of me heard a voice that already knew I was listening and understood, before the rest of me could catch up. That answering it would be like answering a knock when you have not told anybody you are home. I stepped back from the base station. I stood in the middle of my own cab, at 7,000 feet, in the dark, with the lightning throwing my shadow around the walls, and I did not key the mic. The voice said my call sign twice more. Same flat certainty, Lookout 9, Lookout 9. And then, the way the July voice had, it stopped, and the channel went clean, and there was nothing but the storm. I did not sleep the rest of that night. In the morning I told myself the whole slate of reasonable things. It was Skip, and the Skip had happened to carry a call sign that matched mine, because call signs are not exotic. Half the lookout districts in the country number their towers, and there are Lookout 9s from here to the Canadian line. A man in another state had been calling his own Lookout 9, and the cold air had handed him to me. That was possible. I made myself believe it was not just possible, but likely, and I did my 9 o'clock weather with a voice that only shook a little, and Carol Ann copied it and asked if I was all right because I sounded rough, and I said I had slept bad, which was true, and she laughed and said welcome to the tower, and that was that. But I logged it that time. I wrote the date and I wrote the time, 1:52 in the morning, and I wrote, quote, heard own call sign on net, unable to identify station, did not answer, end quote. Writing it down made it smaller. That is the whole reason we write things down. I underlined the time. I did not underline the part about not answering, and I have thought since that this was because some part of me did not want a record of the fact that I had considered it. That I had reached for the mic, that my hand had been on it. 3 nights went by clean. I want to give you the shape of it honestly, because it was not every night, and the nights it did not come were almost worse, because I lay there waiting for it, and the waiting hollowed me out. I started sleeping in the afternoon so I could be up at night, and that is a bad way to run a fire lookout, because the fire watch is a day job. The smokes come up in the heat of the afternoon, and here I was snapping through my own watch so I could sit up all night like a man waiting for a phone call from a deadline. I knew it was bad. I did it anyway. On the 4th night it came back, and it had a fire in it. It was a still night, no lightning, no wind even, which up there is its own kind of loud. The stillness woke me before the radio did. I was lying there in a quiet so complete, I could hear the propane line tick, and my own pulse in the pillow, and I had the thought, clear and unwelcome, that the mountain was holding its breath. I did not like the thought. I put it away. And then the base station opened up, clean and close, and the man's voice came in, already talking, already partway into a thing, the way real traffic does when the squelch clips the front of a word. Black Pine Dispatch, it said. Black Pine Dispatch, Lookout 12. I got smoke. I went still in the bunk. Lookout 12. I did not have to reach for what that was. I had looked at the district map enough times, had run my finger down the numbering enough nights, that I knew the number the way you know a phone number from a house you grew up in. Lookout 12 was Cutthroat. Cutthroat Lookout. Decommissioned. Shuttered. No radio in it. No man in it. No power to it. For 10 years. My brother's tower. And a voice was calling it in as an active station on the FireNet, reporting a smoke at some black hour of the morning into a net where dispatch had been closed since 10 o'clock. Black Pine Dispatch, the voice said again. Patient. Unhurried. Lookout 12. I got a smoke bearing 270 degrees, down toward the lake. Building. You copy. And then it waited. And the quiet came back in around the waiting, and I understood that the waiting was for an answer, and that there was nobody on the whole net to give one but me. I sat up. I put my feet on the cold floor. I did not turn on my headlamp because I did not want the light, though I could not have told you why I did not want the light. The base station's little green power lamp was the only thing in the room, and it laid a faint smear on the wall, and I looked at that instead of at the radio. I thought, if I key up now, and I say Lookout 12, this is Lookout 9, say again your location, then one of two things happens. Either there is a reasonable answer, a relief crew out at Cutthroat I was never told about, a fire scout with a portable radio, something with a badge and a truck, or there is not. I did not key up. I sat there with my hands between my knees and I let it wait. The voice came a third time, and the third time it did a thing that put the cold all the way down into me. It dropped dispatch. It stopped calling Black Pine Dispatch. It said, Lookout 9. It said, 9, you seeing this? And there was, for the first time, the smallest lift at the end of it. Not quite a question. More like a man turning his head toward you, because he knows you have been standing behind him the whole time, and he is done pretending he does not. 9, you seeing this? I did not answer. I sat on the edge of the bunk until the black went gray in the east and the gray went gold, and somewhere in there the channel had gone clean again, though I could not have told you the minute it happened. The way you cannot tell the minute a fever breaks, only that at some point you notice you are cooler. When it was full light I got up and I went out on the catwalk and I glassed the west, down the Black Pine drainage, toward the country where Cutthroat sat below its ridge. There was no smoke. Of course there was no smoke. It was a still clear morning, and the whole west was clean out to the blue edge of it, and there was not a thread of smoke anywhere, least of all at a tower that had been dark for 10 years. I called Hollis that morning. Not on the net. He had given me a number for the district office, a real phone, and there was a spot on the catwalk's north rail where if you held the handheld up and stood on one foot practically, you could raise a bar of signal off a repeater 40 miles off. And I stood out there, and I got him on the second try. I did not tell him what I had heard. I want to be honest that I did not, because I have wondered since whether things would have gone different if I had. What I did was ask him, casual as I could make it, whether there was anybody working out at the old Cutthroat site this summer. Trail crew, I said. Survey. Anybody with a radio. There was a silence on the line that went on a beat too long. Then Hollis said, no, nobody out there. Why? I said I thought I had picked up some odd traffic, and I was trying to place it. Skip, probably, I said, using his word, handing his word back to him like a kid showing a parent he did his homework. Hollis did not say anything for a moment. Then he said, in a voice that had gone careful in exactly the way it had gone careful the day he told me Cutthroat was closed, you logging it? I said I was. He said, good, log it and leave it. And then he said a thing he had not said during the training, a thing that was not in the manual and not in the rule, and that I have carried ever since. He said, your brother logged it too. I did not say anything. Out on the rail the wind came up and moved the handheld signal, and Hollis broke into pieces for a second and came back. He said he should not have said that. He said, forget it. But you do not forget a thing like that, and he knew it, and I think part of him had wanted to say it for 10 years, and I was the first person who had come along that he could say it to. I made him tell me. It took a while. Hollis was not a man who liked the shape of these words in his mouth. But standing on one foot on a catwalk with the hand held against my ear, I got it out of him in pieces, and the pieces were these. That summer Danny worked cutthroat. His second summer, the summer he died, he had started calling Hollis on the office phone the way I was doing now. He had heard traffic on the net at night. He had heard his own call sign. And near the end, in the last week, he had told Hollis that the voice had started to sound like somebody he knew, and Hollis had told him what he told every new lookout, that it was Skip, that it was the air talking to itself, that he should log it and leave it, and Danny had said he was logging it, and then Danny had gone down to Ptarmigan Lake on his day off and not come out. Hollis said the log was still in the district archive, Danny's log. He said the last entry, the day before the day he went to the lake, was a night entry. He would not tell me what it said. He said it did not matter what it said, and that I should not be thinking about any of this, that the smart thing, the only thing, was to do the job in the day and sleep at night with the radio turned down and not go looking for a voice in the dark. He said, and this is the last thing he said before the signal died for good and I could not raise him again, he said, "The net is just wire and air, son. Do not let it be more than that." But whatever it is out there, it does not want to talk to dispatch. It never wanted to talk to dispatch. It picked a Lookout 9 10 years ago, and now it has picked another one, and the picking is the whole of what it does. Do not answer it. Danny answered it. Then he was gone, the signal a flat hiss, and I stood on the catwalk in the middle of a bright morning with 100 miles of clean country around me, and I was colder than I had been at any point in the dark. I did not sleep at night after that. I gave up the pretense. I ran the tower like a haunted man, dozing in snatches in the hot part of the afternoon, when the glare made the country hard to read anyway, and sitting up through the dark with the base station on and the volume up and the log open on my knee, I told myself I was doing it to catch the thing, to build a record, to understand it. That was a lie I could see through even while I told it. I was sitting up because I could not do anything else, because it had said my brother's tower on the net, and I could not walk away from that any more than I could have walked away from Danny's own voice on a phone. For a week it gave me nothing, and then it started to know things. The first thing it knew, it said on a windy night in the last days of July, was a name. Not my call sign this time, a name. It came in clean and closed, the way it always did now, no static, present as a man in the room, and it said, "Bug, you still up there, Bug? I have not told you about Bug. There was no reason to until now. Bug was what Danny called me when we were kids and after. It came from a thing that does not even matter. A summer I was maybe 6, and I would not stop taking apart a dead June bug on the back step to see how it was made. And Danny started calling me Bug, and it stuck the way those things stick, all the way up into our grown lives, so that the last time I ever spoke to my brother on this earth, a phone call 3 days before he drowned, the last word he said to me was that word. Take care of yourself, Bug. Nobody else ever called me that. Not our mother, not a girlfriend. It was Danny's word for me and Danny's alone, and it went in the ground with him in a box in Idaho 10 years before I ever keyed a mic on Grayback Mountain. And now it was on the fire net at 2 in the morning, coming out of a base station in the flat. Certain voice of a man who was done pretending he did not know I was standing behind him. Bug, you still up there? I did not answer it. God help me, I wanted to. I had my hand on the mic, and the word Danny was sitting in my mouth like a stone, and it would have been the easiest thing in the world to press the button and say it. But Hollis's voice was in me too. Danny answered it, and I took my hand off the mic and I sat back and I put both hands flat on my thighs where I could see them, and I did not move them. The voice said Bug 3 more times, spaced out, patient, and then it let me go for the night. After that it knew a thing every night, and everything it knew was a thing only Danny could have known. It is one matter for a voice to have your call sign. Call signs are on a map. It is another matter entirely for a voice to have the things that only ever lived in the private air between 2 brothers, and I am going to set some of them down so the doing of it is clear, because the doing was the point. Hollis had said the picking is the whole of what it does. He was wrong about that. or he did not know the whole of it. The picking was not the whole of it. The knowing was. It knew about the truck. One night it said, "You ever get the Ford running?" And I sat there with the cold coming up through the floor, because Danny and I had a 1986 Ford that we tore the engine out of the summer. I was 19 and never got back together, and it sat in our mother's side yard on blocks for years, and it was a joke between us, a sore spot and a joke both. And nobody knew about that truck but the two of us and our mother was in a home in Coeur d'Alene by then and did not know her own hands. It knew about the lake, not Ptarmigan. Before Ptarmigan, when we were boys, there was a gravel pit outside our town that filled with water, and we swam in it against every rule our parents laid down. And Danny nearly drowned in it once. When he was 12, went down and I got him by the hair and hauled him to the ledge, and we never told a living soul, because telling would have ended the gravel pit for us forever. One night, the voice said, "You pulled me out by the hair that time," and then it said, "You did not pull me out the second time." And I have never told anybody about the gravel pit, not a girlfriend, not a counselor my mother sent me to after the funeral, nobody. It was mine and Danny's, and it was buried. And it came off the fire net at 2 a.m. in a dead man's tower's call sign, and there is no explaining it. There is no skip on earth that carries a thing that only 2 people ever knew, and one of them is dead. It knew about the song. Our father had a truck with a tape deck, and one tape that lived in it, a Creedence tape worn soft, and there was one line off Green River that Danny sang wrong on purpose his whole life just to needle me. And one night, on the net, low, almost to itself, the voice sang Danny's wrong version of that line, the deliberate wrong word and all, and then it stopped, like a man who has caught himself humming and does not know you heard. I had not heard that wrong line since I was a boy in the back seat of a dead man's truck. Our father is gone too. The tape is gone. There is nowhere that line lives anymore except in me, and now in a base station on a mountain at 2 a.m. It knew about the fight. The last real fight Danny and I ever had, the spring before he went to Cutthroat, over money I owed him and did not pay back, and the thing I said to him in that fight that I have never forgiven myself for, the thing about our mother. And one night the voice said the first 4 words of that sentence, my sentence, in my brother's voice, and then it stopped and let the rest of it hang in the cab, and I finished it in my own head the way I have finished it 1,000 times, and the finishing was worse than any voice could have made it. That is a thing I have understood since. It did not always need to say the whole thing. Sometimes it only needed to open the drawer and let me do the rest. A man haunts himself better than any voice can do it for him, and the voice knew that, and it used it. That was when the handset started keying on its own. The first time I thought I had done it, the Bendix King was on the little shelf by the bunk where I kept it charging at night, and I woke to a sound I knew, the small, hard click of a mic keying, the sound the handheld makes when you press the button to talk, and I came up out of sleep sure I had rolled onto it. But it was on the shelf, a foot from my hand, and I was on my back, and as I watched, the little transmit light on the top of it, the red one, came on. It came on the way it comes on when you are sending steady red. Holding, there was nobody's thumb on the button. It held for a 3 count, and it went out. I did not touch it. I lay there and looked at it in the dark, and I thought about the base station, about the red dot the size of a ladybug that had come on under my own flat hand back at the start of all this. The thing I put at the very front of this telling, and I understood that it had not been the start, it had been the middle. It had been the middle, and I had only just now caught up to it. The keying got to be a nightly thing, and it moved. Some nights it was the handheld on the shelf. Some nights it was the base station on the wall, the red transmit lamp coming up steady in the dark while the mic hung untouched on its hook. And here is the thing about a transmit light that you have to have sat in a dark tower to feel all the way. When that light is on, you are sending. The channel is open. Whatever is in the room with you is going out over the net to every tower in the district and every repeater and every dark shuttered cab out there in the country, including the one above the lake where my brother died. The light coming on by itself meant Something in my tower was talking to the net without my hand, and I did not know what it was saying, because a transmit light does not tell you the words. It only tells you the door is open. For a while I had the daylight. That was the deal I made with myself, that the nights belonged to it, but the days were mine. That when the sun came over the eastern peaks, the net went back to being wire and air, and Carol Ann copying weather, and Marcus overtalking his reports, and I could stand on the catwalk with my coffee and be a man with a job. The day the deal broke was a Sunday near the middle of August. It was noon. Full sun, the country wide open, a light wind out of the west, and I was at the firefinder shooting a practice bearing on a rock I used to keep my eyes sharp, and the base station, which I had left on because it was the middle of the day, and the middle of the day was safe, put out a single click, and then the transmit light came on, steady red. At noon, with the sun laying a bright bar across the floor, and my own shadow standing hard and black beside me on the planks, it held for a 3 count, and it went out, and it had never once come in the daylight before, and after that there was no hour that belonged to me. That is the thing it took last, before it took anything else. It took the daytime, it took the one shelf I had left to set myself on. I stopped sleeping, in any real way. I want to be plain about the state I was in, because a man will tell a ghost story and leave out the part where he was coming apart, and the coming apart is not separate from the rest of it. It is the rest of it. I lost weight. I quit shaving because my hands were not steady with a razor. I called my weather in late 2 mornings running, and Carol Ann covered for me on the net, said Lookout 9 was having radio trouble, which I let stand because it was true in a way she did not mean. I ate out of cans, standing up. I glassed the country in the day with my eyes going to the west drainage every few minutes, toward Cutthroat, though the ridge hid it and there was never a thing to see. I started talking to myself, low, just to have a voice in the cab that I knew was mine. And every night it knew another thing, and every night the light came on, and every night I sat with my hands flat where I could see them, and I did not answer. The worst of it, before the last night, was a thing it said that was not a memory. Everything up to then had been the past, the truck and the gravel pit and the word bug, things Danny had, things it had taken out of somewhere and was holding up to show me it had them. But one night near the middle of August it said a thing in the present tense, and that was different, and that was worse. It said, "It is cold down here, bug." It said, "The top is warm, but you go down a foot and it takes your legs." And I sat there and I could not breathe, because that was the lake. That was Ptarmigan. That was the exact thing the report had said, and the exact thing my whole family had never been able to make. Lie down, warm on top and cold under it, that takes your legs. And it was not a memory of Danny's, because Danny never came up from that cold to remember it. It was a report. It was a lookout calling, in a condition. It was a man telling me where he was and what it was like there, and where he was down. "Come down," it said. It was the first time it had asked me for anything. "Come see. It is not far. You take the Cutthroat Road off Forest Road 250, and you go to the end and you walk in to the lake, and it is not far, bug. It is not far at all." I did not answer it, and I did not go. But I will tell you that I got up that night, and I put my boots on. I do not have a memory of deciding to. I came to myself, sitting on the bunk with my boots laced and the truck keys in my hand, and I did not remember getting the keys off the hook by the door, and the transmit light on the base station was on, steady red, holding, and it held the whole time I sat there looking at my own hands holding the keys. And I understood that if I had a bad enough night, if it knew a heavy enough thing, I would walk down those stairs and get in the truck and drive to the end of the Cutthroat Road and walk in to the lake in the dark. That is what happened to Danny. I am nearly sure of it now. He did not slip. He was called, and he answered with his feet. He walked into the cold water because a voice in a tower knew the word only his brother knew and asked him to come see. I put the keys back. I took my boots off. I sat up till dawn with my back against the base station, so the light, if it came on, would be behind my own head where I could not see it. And in the morning I made up my mind that I would go down, not to the lake, down the mountain, off the job, out of the district, home. I had 3 weeks left in my season, and I did not care. I would call Hollis and tell him I was done, and I would drive out on Forest Road 250 in the daylight, and I would never key a mic again as long as I lived. I decided that in the clean light of an August morning, and I believed I would do it, and I even started packing a duffel. I did not get to go down in the daylight. The last night came first, and the last night came with a storm. It came up out of the southwest in the late afternoon while I was packing, a wall of cloud the color of a bruise stacking over the sawtooth country, and I stood on the catwalk and watched it come, and knew it was going to be a bad one. The barometer had been falling all day. The air had that copper taste it gets. I did my last real job as a lookout without meaning it to be my last, which was to watch that cell come in and to call in the strikes, because whatever was happening to me at night, in the day the country could still burn. And there were crews and hot shots and people in cabins down in the drainages who needed to know where the lightning was putting fire on the ground. The storm hit the mountain at dusk. It did not pass to the side the way the July cells had. It came right over the top of Grayback, and it put the tower inside itself. There is no describing what a lightning storm is in a glass box on stilts at 7,000 feet to a man who has not sat one out. You are the highest thing for miles. The tower is grounded, there are cables run down into the rock. There is a stool with glass insulators on the legs that you are supposed to sit on with your feet up if it gets bad. And Hollis had shown me all of it and told me it works, and I had believed him in June. In August, in the middle of it, with the strikes coming so close that the flash and the crack were the same event, with the whole cab lighting up white and the smell of the air gone sharp and metal, I did not believe anything. I sat on the glass-legged stool with my boots up on the rungs and my hands in my lap, and I watched the storm try to get into the room. The radio went haywire in a storm like that. Static crashed across the net, with every strike, a wall of noise, and between the strikes there were pockets of dead quiet, and it was in one of those pockets, full dark now, the storm right on top of me, that the base station opened up clean and close, and my brother's voice came through whole. It was whole. That is the thing I can never make anybody understand. For weeks it had been a voice that was nearly Danny, close and flat and knowing, but with a wrongness in it I could hear and could not name. It was a voice that had gotten my brother nearly right, and nearly is its own kind of wrong, worse than a thing that is wrong all the way through. That night the nearly was gone. It was Danny. It was my brother's actual voice, the warmth in it, the little scrape low in it from the cigarettes he pretended he did not smoke, the way he leaned on the front of my name. It was the voice off the last phone call. It was the voice from the back step over the June bug. It was Danny, and the storm was screaming, and the light was flashing the cab white and black, and my brother said, "Bug, it is really coming down out here, you copy." I had the mic in my hand. I do not remember taking it off the hook. It was in my hand, and my thumb was on the button, and the whole of me was one single want, which was to press it and say his name, to say Danny, to say I am here, to say I have been here the whole time, and I am sorry I did not pull you out the second time, and I am here. 10 years of that dream, Danny with his face turned away and his arm up on a shore I could not reach, and here was the reaching. All I had to do was press a button my thumb was already resting on. The transmit light was on, steady red, but my thumb was not pressing it. That is the thing. The light was on and holding, and I was not the one holding it, which meant the door was already open, which meant something was already sending, and if I pressed the button I would not be opening a door. I would be answering through one that was already open. I would be keying back to a voice on the net that should not be transmitting. And every night for a month I had not answered, and every night I had lived to see the gray come up in the east, and the not answering was the only thing between me and the end of the cutthroat road. "Bug," my brother said. The storm tore across the net and buried him, and he came back. "Bug, I need you to come down. I am at the lake. It is cold, Bug. I have been in the cold a long time, and I am so tired, and I just need you to come down and pull me out You are the only one who ever pulled me out. Please, key up and tell me you are coming. I do not know how long I sat there with my thumb on the button. Time went away. I have heard it said since that fear eats the clock, that a scared man loses hours and never feels them go. And it is true. I looked up at some point and the storm had moved off the peak and I did not know when. But in the worst of it, with his voice in the room and the light burning red and my thumb 1 ounce of pressure from answering, the thing I held onto was not brave and it was not clever. It was small and it was mean and it was the only thing that held. It was this. Danny never said please. Not to me. Not once in his life. He was my big brother and he ordered me around and he teased me and he loved me and he never in 30 years of it said please to me. Not once. And here was a voice with his warmth and his scrape and his lean on my name. And it said please. And the please was the tell. The please was the wrongness the storm had almost hidden. It had gotten everything right except the one thing a brother would never say, and the getting it wrong is what saved me. I took my thumb off the button. I hung the mic back on its hook. My hand was not working right. I have told you fear lives in the hands, and mine had gone to somebody else's hands, and it took me 3 tries to get the mic on the hook because the little loop kept missing the peg. When I finally got it hung, I backed away from the base station across the cab until my spine was against the west windows and the storm-cold glass was against me through my shirt, and I stood there and I watched the radio. The voice changed. When I did not answer the please, the warmth went out of it, not slow, all at once, the way a light goes out. The Danny went out of it, and what was left was the flat thing from the start, the voice that already knew the answer, and it did not sound like my brother anymore, and it did not try to. 9, it said. Just the number now. 9, 9, 9. Fast, clipped, over and over, and with every one the transmit light flared. And then the handheld on the shelf keyed to its red light coming up, and the 2 of them were going at once, base and handheld both transmitting. Both lights burning steady in a cab, gone dark between lightning and the net filled up. Not with the voice, with everything. I heard the whole net at once, all the call signs. Lookout 4 and Lookout 7 and Lookout 2 and dispatch and voices I did not know, all of them layered and running together and none of them awake. None of them real. A whole net of the dead and the not there talking at the same time, and under all of it, holding all of it up, that flat voice saying my number. I did the only thing I could think to do. I went for the base station, and I turned it off. I found the knob in the dark with both bad hands, and I turned it down and off, and the power lamp died. And the voices did not stop. That is the part. The base station was off, dead, no power, and the net was still in the room, quieter now, coming out of the handheld on the shelf. And I crossed to the handheld, and I turned it off too, held the button down till its screen went black, and the voices came down to nothing, and then there was only the storm. Moving off now, the flash going white further and further to the northeast, the crack and the roll getting their spacing back, the night coming apart into its ordinary pieces. Both radios were off. I had turned them off with my own hands. I stood in the middle of the cab in the dark, and I could hear my own breath, and the storm going away, and the propane line ticking, and nothing else. And then, in the dark, from the shelf, the handheld clicked, the small heart click of a mic keying, and its red light came on, off, dead, screen black, and the light came on, steady red, holding, sending, and I did not go near it. I got down on the floor of my own tower with my back against the cabinet that held the firefinder, my brother's brass ring above my head in the dark, and I put my hands over my ears like a child, and I stayed there on the floor until the light in the east went from black to gray to the ordinary gold of a morning after a storm, and somewhere in there the red light on the handheld went out, and I did not see it go out. because my eyes were shut and my hands were over my ears, and I was saying the only prayer I know, which is not really a prayer, it is just my mother's name for God, over and over, the way you say a thing to keep from hearing another thing. When it was full light, I got up off the floor. My whole body had gone stiff on the cold planks. The storm had passed and left the country washed and steaming, and there was smoke down in the west drainage. Real smoke, a lightning fire the storm had planted somewhere below Cutthroat Ridge. A thin white column standing up straight. In the dead, calm, morning air, real fire. My job. And I stood at the west window and looked at that smoke, and I could not make myself turn on the radio to call it in. I could not touch either radio. I looked at that fire growing down there in my sector, the thing I had come to this mountain to catch, and I let it burn, because turning on the radio meant opening the net, and I was done with the net forever. I packed the truck in an hour. I did not do it neat. I threw the duffel down the stairs and half my gear with it, and I left the fire finder and the cook stove and the shutters open, and I left my log on the bunk, and I climbed down the switchback stairs of Grayback Lookout for the last time with both radios shut off and shoved to the bottom of the duffel where I could not see their lights. I got in the truck. I drove out on Forest Road 250 in the daylight, fast, too fast for that road, and where the Cutthroat turnoff came up on my right, the road that goes to the end, and then you walk in to the lake. I did not slow down, and I did not look. I kept my eyes on the two ruts in front of me, and I drove until the trees closed over the road behind me, and Grayback Mountain was gone in the mirror. I drove the 50 miles of Forest Road to the district office in a little under 2 hours, and the whole way I kept the duffel with the two radios in the truck bed instead of the cab, because I did not want them behind the seat where a light could come on in the dark of the footwell and I would see it in the mirror. That is the state I was in. A grown man who would not ride in a cab with a switched-off radio. The lightning fire I had left burning got called in by Lookout 4. I heard about it from Hollis when I got to the office. Peg on Signal Butte had caught the smoke a little after 9 that morning, shot her bearing, and dispatch had crossed it with a satellite hit and put a crew on it by noon. It was a small fire, and they caught it small, and nobody got hurt. And the only cost of my walking off my watch was that the smoke I saw first got called in an hour late by somebody else. Hollis told me that plane, no heat in it, but I have carried the hour. A lookout has one job, and I sat on the floor with my hands over my ears while my sector burned. I know what I am. I made my peace with what I am on that drive, and the peace is that I am alive, and Danny is not, and I will take the hour. Hollis was in the office when I came in. He took one look at me, at whatever I looked like, unshaved and hollow and shaking, and he did not ask me a single question. He put me in a chair, and he got me a cup of coffee from a machine, and he sat down across from me and he waited. And I told him all of it in a rush, out of order, the call sign and Cutthroat, and the word bug, and the truck, and the gravel pit, and the cold that takes your legs, and the please that Danny never said, and the light coming on with the power off, and the handheld clicking on the shelf in the dark. He let me get all the way to the end of it. He did not tell me I was tired, or that it was skip, or that I had not eaten. He had stopped saying those things somewhere back in the summer, I think, and I think he had stopped saying them 10 years back to another Merrick boy, and had been sorry ever since that he ever said them at all. When I was done, he got up, and he went to a gray metal cabinet in the back of the office, and he unlocked it, and he took out a logbook, an old one, the cover soft with handling, and he set it on the desk in front of me, and he opened it near the back, and he turned it around so I could read it, and he put his finger on the last entry, and he said, "This is your brother's. This is the last night he logged. You wanted to know what it said. I have been carrying whether to show you all summer, and I am done carrying it." It was Danny's handwriting. I would know it anywhere. He printed. He never learned cursive right, and the print was his, a little slanted, the G with the open tail. The entry had a date in the middle of August, 10 years gone, and a time past 2 in the morning, and it said, in my brother's careful print, quote, "Heard call sign on net again," not skip. It knows things. It knew about the gravel pit. It sounds like it is at the lake. It says come down and pull it out. I am not going to answer it. If I answer it, I think I have to go. Going to sleep with the radio off. End quote. And then, under it, in the same hand but looser, like it was written later, in the dark, half asleep, one more line that was not a log entry at all. It said, quote, it just said, please, end quote. That was the last thing my brother ever wrote. He wrote it the night before his day off. The next afternoon he drove to the end of the Cutthroat Road and walked into Ptarmigan Lake and went to the cold water that takes your legs, a strong swimmer, into deep water close to shore, and he did not come out. He heard the pleas, and the pleas got him, because Danny did not know what I only knew by luck and by a mean small memory on a stool in a storm, which is that the please is the tell. The please is the one thing it gets wrong. My brother took it as the one thing that made it real. I took it as the one thing that made it false. That is the whole difference between us. That is the only reason I am the one telling this, and he is the one in the ground in Idaho. A coin toss on a single word. Hollis closed the log. He said the district had tried, over the years, in the quiet way an outfit tries to manage a thing it will not say out loud. Cutthroat had been decommissioned within the year. The radio pulled, the tower shuttered. They had renumbered some of the towers so the old call signs would not be used, but they could not renumber all of it, and Grayback had always been Lookout 9, and I had come along with my brother's last name and asked for the job, and Hollis had hired me anyway. And he told me in that office that hiring me was the thing he would answer for when his time came. He said he should have told me no. He said he had told himself a young man had a right to a job and a paycheck, and that the whole business was an old man's guilt talking, and that he had let a Merrick go back up on that mountain because he could not stand to be the one who said the name of the thing out loud. I do not blame Hollis. I want that on the record. He did not know for certain. Nobody can know a thing like that for certain. He only feared it, the way you fear a thing you have no shelf to put on. I did not go back to a tower. I did not need Hollis to tell me not to, and he did not try. I gave the district back its keys, and I drove to Idaho, and I sat by my brother's stone for an afternoon, and I did not say anything to it, because I had learned that summer to be careful about what I answered. Then I went home, and I picked up a nail gun again, because framing is a day job, and it is loud, and there is no net. I am fine, mostly. That is the word my life uses now. Fine. I sleep with the light on, which the woman I see does not ask about anymore. I do not own a radio. Not a scanner, not a weather band, not the little emergency crank kind people keep for storms. When the crew uses the cheap Motorola's to call across a job, somebody else carries mine. But you cannot get all the way clear of them. A job I was on last winter had them, the little black handhelds, and at the end of the day the foreman would leave the spares charging on a shelf in the site trailer. And I slept in that trailer some nights when the drive was too long, and there was one on the nightstand by the cot, off its screen, dark, charging. Some nights it clicks. I keep my eyes shut when it does. I have gotten good at keeping my eyes shut, but I can see it through the lids anyway, the way you can see a light through your own skin, the little red one on the top coming up steady in the dark, holding, sending, the door standing open, and under the click, low, in a voice that has finally stopped bothering to get the warmth right, the one word that is mine and Danny's and nobody else's on this earth. Bug. And the light stays on, and I do not answer it, and I lie there with my eyes shut and my hands flat where I could see them if I opened them, and I wait for the gray to come up in the east. Bug. The tapping started again a little after 2 in the morning, and I lay on my cot in the dark and counted it the way a man counts thunder to find how far off the storm is. 3 taps, a wait, 3 more. It was coming from the north glass, which is the glass that faces nothing but 40 feet of empty air, and then the tops of the pines. And I did not get up, and I did not turn on the propane lamp, and I did not go and look. I had learned that much by then. I lay there with my hands folded on my chest like a dead man in a box, and I waited for it to stop. And after a while it did, and that was the worst part, because a thing that stops when it decides to has been in charge the whole time. My name is Cole Merrick, and for 6 seasons I ran a fire lookout on the west end of the Wolf-Tooth District, up on a knuckle of granite the maps call Signal Peak. The tower is a 14 by 14 box of windows set on top of 4 steel legs 40 feet in the air, with a catwalk running all the way around the outside, and a set of storm shutters hinged at the top of every window so you can drop them in a blow. Below the tower is the tree line, and past the tree line there is nothing a person needs. That was the whole reason I took it. I wanted a job where the nearest human being was 14 miles of switchback away and could not get to me without a truck, and a good reason. I should tell you about my knee before I tell you about the rest, because the knee is the honest part of me, and the rest of it I spent a long time lying about. I blew the knee out on a talus slope in my 3rd year of search and rescue, came down wrong on a rock the size of a television, and felt something in there let go like a wet rope parting. They pinned it, and I came back too soon, and it never set right, so I walk with a hitch, worse than a cold, and cold is most of what there is up on Signal Peak. Every morning I came down the tower stairs sideways like an old man, one hand on the rail, favoring it. The doctor down in Kettle Falls told me I would feel it every day for the rest of my life, and he was right, and I did not mind, because a body that hurts is a body that is paying attention. The thing I was avoiding had a name, and the name was Marla Vance. But I did not think about Marla in the daylight if I could help it, and in that first part of the season I mostly could. The days up there had a shape to them, and the shape kept my hands busy. I would wake before the sun, put the kettle on the little propane burner, and grind coffee in a hand mill I had bought at a yard sale in Colville for $2. I drank it black out on the catwalk while the valley filled up with light, and I watched the fog sit in the low places like milk poured into a bowl. Then I would do the morning check. I would stand at the Osborne firefinder in the center of the room, which is a brass ring on a stand with a map of the whole district laid flat inside it and 2 sighting vanes that swing around the rim. And I would turn it slow through every degree of the compass and put my eye to the far vane and read the country. Smoke reads different from fog. Fog lies down, smoke stands up and leans. After 6 seasons, I could tell a slash pile from a real start at 9 miles, and I was proud of that in a small way, the way you are proud of a thing your body knows how to do without asking your head. At 9 sharp, I got on the radio. The radio was an old Forest Service set bolted to the wall by the west glass, and I would key it and say my number, and dispatch would come back, and most mornings that was the only voice I heard until 9 the next day. The woman who worked the desk that summer was named Peg, and Peg had a voice like a screen door, dry and a little rusty, and she had been running the Wolf-Tooth dispatch for going on 20 years. She called everybody honey, and she meant nothing by it, and it landed soft anyhow. "Signal Peak? Go ahead," she would say, and I would give her my weather. Temperature off the little dial thermometer nailed by the door. Wind out of the west at 8, gusting 15. Relative humidity. Visibility. Nothing to report. That last part I said most days. Nothing to report. Peg told me once, early on, that I had the cleanest logs on the district, and I told her that was because nothing ever happened up here, and she laughed her screen door laugh and said, "Honey, that is exactly how we like it." I want you to understand that I was happy, or the nearest thing to it I had been in 3 years. There is a peace in a place that does not need you to be a good man. The mountain did not care what I had done. The mountain wanted me to watch for smoke and drop the shutters in a lightning storm and stay off the propane after dark so the lamp would last. And I could do all of that, and doing it filled the day, and a filled day is a kind of mercy. The nights were harder, and I knew going in they would be. Night is when a man is alone with the tenant that lives behind his eyes. I brought books up, paperbacks by the box, and I sat up reading by the propane lamp until my eyes gave out, and when the reading stopped working I would lie on the cot and listen to the tower talk. Because a tower does talk. It is a steel and glass thing standing up in the wind, and it moves. The legs flex. The glass hums when the wind comes hard from the west, a low note like somebody blowing across a bottle. The stairs tick as the metal cools. The whole structure has a language of small sounds, and in the first weeks I learned all of them the way you learn the sounds of a new house, so that later, when a sound came that was not on the list, I would know it clean. That is the part I keep coming back to. I knew the tower's voice. I had it by heart. So when the tapping came, I did not have the comfort a man gets to have. The comfort of telling himself it was probably nothing, just the house settling, just the wind. I had already met the wind. The wind and I were on speaking terms. This was not the wind. Marla Vance was 22 years old the October I did not find her in time, and she had a face I could pick out of a crowd of 1,000 now, though I saw it in person only twice, and both times she was past helping. She had reddish hair she kept in a braid and a spray of freckles across her nose and cheeks that made her look younger than she was 14 instead of 22. And she was missing a little chip off one front tooth that showed when she smiled in the photo her mother gave us. Green rain shell, that was what she had gone up in. A green rain shell and boots that were fine for a day hike and no good at all for what the mountain did to her, which was to drop 40 degrees and turn the rain to sleet while she was somewhere off the trail with a turned ankle and no way down. I was the one who called the search. I want to be plain about that, because for a long time I told it other ways. There were two drainages she could have gone down, the elbow and the cut bank, and we split the teams, and past a certain hour the incident commander wanted to pull everybody off the ridge because a storm was moving in, and he had 24 volunteers strung out across country in the dark, and he did not want to be running two searches by morning, one for her and one for us. He asked me which drainage. He asked me because I knew that country better than anybody on the team. I had walked both drainages 100 times, and I stood there with the rain coming sideways off my hood, and I said, the elbow. I said, put what we have left down the elbow. She was in the cut bank. They found her the third day, 1.5 miles up a side gully that fed the cut bank, curled up under a deadfall with her hood cinched down to a hole the size of a fist. And the county coroner said she had likely been alive the first night and maybe into the second, which meant that on the night I sent the last of the search down the wrong drainage, she was up the right one, alive, waiting for lights that turned and went the other way. I do not tell it that plain often. I am telling it plain now because you need to know the exact shape of the thing I carried up Signal Peak, so that later, when the thing outside my window went looking for a way in, you will understand why it wore the face it wore and used the voice it used. It did not pick Marla by accident. Nothing about it was an accident. It went into me, and it found the softest, rottenest board in the floor, and it set its weight there, and it pushed. But that was later. In June there was only the mountain and the coffee and Peg's dry voice on the radio and the long, clean days with nothing to report. I had 6 seasons behind me, and I thought I had found the one place on earth that would leave me be. The first tap came on a night in the last week of June, and I have gone over that night so many times that I no longer trust all of it, but the parts I trust I will give you. It had been a hot day, the first real hot one, the kind that makes the ridgeline shimmer and puts a haze in the valley that a new lookout mistakes for smoke 12 times before he learns better. By dark, the heat had not let go. I had the west window cranked open on its hinge to catch what little air there was, and I was lying on the cot with a paperback tented on my chest, a beat-up copy of a Louis L'Amour I had been through twice already, because at a certain hour of the night you do not want a book that asks anything of you. The lamp was low. Outside the pines were quiet. There was almost no wind, which up on Signal Peak is stranger than a gale, and the tower was silent in a way it rarely got. None of its usual ticking and humming, just the small sounds of me breathing and the pages turning, and then a tap on the glass. One tap, up high, on the north window. Not loud, the sound a fingernail makes, or a twig. I did not even sit up. I lay there, and I thought, Branch, the way you would. A branch had come loose somewhere and blown up against the glass, or a pine cone, though there was no wind to blow it and no tree close enough to reach. But the mind does not do that arithmetic in the first second. In the first second, the mind just files it. Branch. Nothing. And I turned my page. Then it came again. Tap. Same spot, up high on the north glass. And the arithmetic I had skipped the first time came due all at once, because the north window is the one window in the whole tower that has nothing near it. The catwalk runs under it like it runs under all four, but there is no tree on the north side inside of 30 feet. The ground drops away sharp on that side into a scree field, and the nearest pine tall enough to reach the glass at 40 feet up would have to be growing out of thin air. I lay still and I listened, and my heart had started going, not hard, just noticing itself, the way it does when you are on a ladder and the ladder shifts. Tap. I got up. I want to say I got up slow and careful, but the truth is, I got up like a man who has convinced himself there is a rational thing on the other side of a door, which is to say I got up almost annoyed, ready to find the loose piece of flashing or the branch snagged in the shutter hinge and fix it and go back to bed. I took the propane lamp off its hook and I carried it toward the north glass, and the light swung my shadow around the room, big and then small, and I put my face close to the window and cupped my hand against the glass to cut the glare, and I looked out into the dark. Nothing. 40 feet of black air, and below it the pale broken shine of the scree field and the quarter moon, and past that the black wall of the trees. No branch. No flashing. No bird stunned against the pane, which is a thing that happens. A nighthawk will hit a lit window sometimes, and you will find it on the catwalk in the morning with its neck wrong. There was nothing on the catwalk. There was nothing on the glass. There was nothing that could have made the sound, and the sound had stopped the moment I stood up, which I did not let myself think about, though I thought about it plenty later. I stood there with the lamp until my arm got tired. Then I told myself the thing a person tells himself. I told myself a bat had done it, a bat working the bugs that gather on a lit window, brushing the glass with a wingtip. That was a real thing that happened up there. I had watched bats hunt the window on summer nights, little brown ones, quick as a thought. A bat. Sure. I hung the lamp back up and I got back on the cot, and I lay there a long time with my eyes open, and the tapping did not come again that night, and by morning I had it mostly talked away. I told Peg about it on the 9 o'clock check, but I told it as a joke, the way you hand somebody a fear wrapped up as a funny story, so they can hand you back the version where it is nothing. Had a bat trying to get in the north window last night, I said. Kept me up. And Peg laughed and said, honey, you want lonesome, you got lonesome. And then she gave me the fire weather for the day, and I wrote it in the log in my small clean hand. And I did not think about the tap again until the sun went down, because here is the thing about a fear you have talked away. It comes back at the same hour it left. All day I was fine. I did my scans. I ate my lunch out on the south catwalk with my bad legs stuck out in front of me. I worked the country through the Osborne and found a little smoke away off on the Idaho side that turned out to be a permitted burn. A good day. A day with nothing to report. But as the light went long and gold and then gray, I felt the night coming the way you feel weather coming in your bad joints, and by the time it was full dark, I was sitting up on the cot instead of lying down, with the lamp turned higher than I needed it, watching the north glass. It did not come that night, nor the next. 3 nights it left me alone, and by the third I had begun to feel like a fool, sitting up with the lamp burning down my propane for nothing, jumping at the ordinary ticking of the cooling stairs. On the 4th night, I let the lamp go out at a decent hour, and I lay down like a normal man, and I slept. And a little after 2 in the morning, the tapping came, and this time it was not one tap, and it was not the idle brush of a bat working a window. This time there was a rhythm to it. 3 taps, close together, on the north glass. Then a pause, a long one, long enough that I thought it was done. Then 3 more. And the spacing of the 3 was the thing that got me up off the cot, with my mouth gone dry, because a branch does not space itself. A branch does not knock and wait and knock again. There was a hand in it. Not a hand I could see, not yet, but the pattern had the shape of a hand behind it, the way you can hear a person on the other end of a phone line breathing before they speak, and you know the difference between a live line and a dead one. I did not take the lamp this time. That was the first thing I did different, and I did not decide it so much as my body decided it for me, some old animal part of me that did not want to be lit up in a box of glass with the dark looking in. I crossed the floor in the near black, feeling my way past the Osborne, and I stood back from the north window a good 6 feet, out of arm's reach of it, though I could not have told you then why arm's reach of a window 40 feet in the air was a thing to worry about. And I watched, and I waited, and the 3 taps came again, and this time, standing where I was, I saw the glass move, just barely. A window that size, set in a wood frame, will flex a hair when a weight presses it. And on the 3rd tap I saw the pane flex inward, the faintest bending of the moonlight that lay across it, and spring back. Something was not brushing that glass. Something was pushing it, testing it. 3 little pushes, up high, at a height where there was nothing to stand on and nothing to hold, and then the long wait, and I understood in a cold rush that the weight was not the thing resting. The weight was the thing listening. It knocked, and then it waited to hear what I would do. So I did nothing. I stood in the dark, and I did nothing, and I made no sound. And after the 4th round of 3, the tapping stopped, and I stood there another hour to be sure, and it did not come again, and I did not sleep at all. I got Peg on the radio at 9, and I did not make a joke this time. I asked her, careful, like it was a work question, whether the other lookouts on the district ever reported anything hitting their towers at night. Birds, I said. Bats. Whatever. Just curious. And Peg was quiet a second, which Peg was not usually, and then she said, in a different voice than her honey voice, "Why do you ask, Signal Peak?" And I said, no reason, just something was working my north window the last few nights, and it was keeping me up. And she said, well, she said sometimes the young pilots on the ridge over on Cougar report bats. And then she said, you doing all right up there, Cole? She used my name. She almost never used my name. And I said, sure, Peg. I'm fine, just short on sleep. And she let it go. But I could tell she filed it, the way I file things. And that made me feel worse instead of better, because it meant the question had landed on her as strange, too. That was the thing about the accumulation, if I can call it that. It came on slow enough that every single step of it could be explained, and I explained every single step of it, right up until the explanations ran out all at once and left me standing over a drop I had been walking toward for weeks. A bat became a branch, became a rhythm, became a pressure on the glass, and each one was only a small step past the one before, and a man will walk a long way in small steps if every step looks like the last one. The next night I was ready for it, or I told myself I was. I let the lamp burn until midnight, and then I put it out, and I lay on the cot in my clothes, boots on, though I could not have said what I planned to do in my boots, 40 feet up a tower, with the stairs the only way down. I waited for 2. 2 came and went. Nothing. I must have drifted, because the next thing I knew I was awake, with my heart slamming, and I did not know why, and then it came, and it was on the wrong side. The east glass. Tap, tap, tap. Same 3, same spacing, same patient wait after, but it had moved. It had gone around. And you cannot go around a tower 40 feet up unless you go along the catwalk. And the catwalk is a graded steel walk 2 feet wide with a pipe rail. And a man can walk it. I walked it every day. But a man walking it in the night makes noise. The grating rings under a boot. You cannot help it. There had been no noise. Whatever was tapping the east glass now had gotten from the north side to the east side without a single ring of the grating. And I lay there doing that arithmetic. And I did not like the answer, because the only ways to cross from the north glass to the east glass without touching the catwalk were to fly or to go along the outside of the rail on the wrong side of it, hand over hand, 40 feet up in the dark. I did not get up to look. I learned that much. But I lay there facing the east glass, and the moon was on that side that night, and so I could see the window playing. A gray square hung in the black, and I kept my eyes on it while the tapping worked at it. 3, and wait, 3, and wait, and once, just once, near the top edge of the window where the storm shutter was folded up against the frame, I thought I saw the darkness there change, thicken, as if a piece of the night just past the glass had gathered itself up a little denser than the rest. It was there, and then a cloud went over the moon, and it was gone, and I never got to decide if I had seen it, and that is how it worked. That was the whole method of the thing. It never gave me enough to be sure. It only ever gave me enough to be afraid. In the morning I went out on the catwalk in the daylight, which I had been afraid to do and made myself do anyway, and I walked the whole square of it, all 4 sides, looking for what I did not know. Scratches, marks, some sign. The grating was just the grating, gray steel, a little rust in the joints. The rail was just the rail. On the east side, under the window, I got down on my bad knee, which cost me, and I looked at the outside of the glass close, and there was nothing on it, no smear, no mark, and I felt the fool again, kneeling there in the clean morning light, with the whole green world falling away below me, and a hawk riding the updraft off the scree, and not one thing wrong anywhere I could point to. I stood up, and I looked out over the district, all those miles of timber I was paid to watch, and I thought, you are losing it up here, Cole. You are up here alone with what you did, and you are starting to hear it knock. And I almost had myself believing that a man can do a lot with the word alone. Alone explains hearing things. Alone explains seeing shapes. I had come up here to be alone, and now the alone was working on me. That was all. And the cure was to sleep and eat and do my scans and finish the season and go down off the mountain like a man. And I resolved to do exactly that. And I felt better for resolving it, the way you do. Then I went to hang my coffee cup on its nail by the north window, and I saw the mark on the outside of the glass, up high, at the top of the pane where I had not thought to look, because who looks at the top of a window that only a bird could reach? And the resolve went out of me, like water out of a cracked cup. It was a smear. Low down it would have been nothing, a bug, a bit of pitch. But it was up high, above the middle bar of the window, at the height a tall man's hand would reach, if a tall man could stand in the air on the far side of the glass, and it was not a smudge of dirt. It had a shape. 4 lines drawn down through a haze of something that had dried milky on the glass, 4 lines close together and slightly spread at the bottom, and I stood and looked at it a long time before my mind would put the word to it, and the word was fingers. 4 fingers, dragged down the outside of the glass, at the top, 40 feet up, on the one side of the tower where nothing grows and nothing stands and nothing should ever be able to reach. I cleaned it off. I want to be honest about that too, because it is not the brave thing and it is not the smart thing, but it is what I did. I got the rag I used on the windows, and I wet it at the tank, and I went out on the catwalk, out the north door, and I reached up over my head with my arm shaking, and I wiped the mark off the glass, and it came off slick, greasy, like it had oil in it, and it left a track on the rag that I did not want to smell and smelled anyway, and it smelled like a deer that has been dead in the brush about a day. Sweet and turning, I threw the rag off the catwalk and watched it fall the whole 40 feet and catch in the scree a little white flag down there in the rocks, and I did not go get it, and it stayed there the rest of the season, and some mornings I would look at it from the catwalk, a dirty rag caught in the stones, and it was the only proof I had that any of this was real and outside of my own head. I should have called it in right then, I know that now. I should have keyed the radio and told Peg the plain truth, that something was working my tower at night and leaving marks on the outside of glass 40 feet up, and let her think I had cracked. Let her send somebody up to relieve me, let them find whatever they found or find nothing at all. But I did not, and I have had a long time to sit with why, and the why is not complicated. It is only ugly. I did not call it in, because a part of me had already decided that this was mine, that it had come from me on purpose. That a man who sends a search down the wrong drainage and leaves a girl to die under a deadfall in the sleet does not get to pick up a radio and ask for help when the dark comes knocking. I did not think it in those words, but it was in me, running under everything, the way the water runs under Signal Peak, in those hairline seams, in the granite where you cannot see it and can only hear it if you put your ear to the stone. I felt like it had found me, and a part of me, the rotten board, the soft place, felt like it was right too. So I did not call it in. I kept my logs clean, nothing to report. And I got ready for the nights the only way I knew how, which was to make the tower into a box I could seal. I started dropping the storm shutters at dark. The storm shutters are wood, heavy, hinged along the top of each window on the outside, and in the day they fold up flat against the roof overhang and hook there. And when weather comes, you go out on the catwalk and unhook them and let them swing down, and you latch them at the bottom, and then the tower is blind. All four sides, a wood box with a lid. You are not supposed to run with them down except in a real blow, because a blind lookout is a useless lookout, but at night there is nothing to see anyway. And I told myself that, and I told dispatch nothing. And every evening as the light failed, I went around the catwalk and let the shutters down one by one, north, east, south, west, and latched them, and went back inside and sat in the wood box with the propane lamp and my books and the tapping shut out on the far side of 2 inches of pine. It helped the first night. The tapping came a little after 2, and it was muffled now, dulled through the wood, 3 and wait, 3 and wait, and it moved around the tower the way it liked to, north to east to south, working each shutter. And I sat in the middle of the floor by the Osborne with the lamp turned down, and I did not answer, and I did not look, because there was nothing to look at now but a wall, and the wall was between us, and I held on to the wall being between us, like a man holds a rail on a bad stair. But a shutter is not a wall. A shutter is a piece of wood on a hinge with a gap all the way around it where it does not quite meet the frame, a finger-width gap at the sides and top. And on the second night of the shutters being down, I learned that the thing outside had found the gap. The tapping stopped being on the glass. It moved to the edges, to the gap. A slow scratch now, down the crack between the shutter and the frame. The sound a nail makes drag down a seam, feeling along it, top to bottom, the way you would run your finger down the edge of a door in the dark looking for the knob. It was looking for the way in. It had knocked and gotten no answer. And now it had stopped knocking and started searching. And that was worse. That was so much worse. Because a thing that knocks still wants to be let in. And a thing that has stopped knocking and started searching has decided it is coming in whether you let it or not. I stuffed the gaps. I tore up an old wool blanket, and I jammed strips of it into the cracks around every shutter, working in the dark by feel, because I would not open a shutter to do it in the light. And the wool helped with the sound, but I knew it did nothing for the rest of it. And along about then, I stopped sleeping in any real way. I would go under for 20 minutes, half an hour, and come up gasping out of a dream I could not hold on to, except for the feeling of it, which was always the same feeling, the feeling of being about to open a door I must not open. And I would lie there in the wool-stuffed dark and listen to it work the seams, and I would say the sentence to myself, the sentence that had become the only rule I had, the only thing keeping the floor under me. Do not look at it. Whatever it does, do not look at it. Do not open anything. Do not answer. I do not know where the rule came from. That is the truth, and it is the part that unsettles me most looking back, because it was not a rule anybody gave me, and it was not a rule I reasoned my way to. It was just there, from early on, sitting in me, fully formed, like a thing I had always known, the way you know not to step off a cliff without ever having been told. Do not look at what taps the glass. Do not answer what calls in the night. It came up out of some old floor under the floor of me, older than my own life, and I obeyed it without understanding it. And I believe with everything in me that obeying it is the only reason I came down off that mountain at all. Peg heard it in my voice by then. It was maybe the 5th or 6th morning of no real sleep, and my 9 o'clock check came out ragged, and I got the weather numbers turned around and had to give them twice. And Peg came back and did not say them back to me the way she should have. Instead, she was quiet, and then she said, "Cole, honey, I'm going to be straight with you. You don't sound right. You've sounded off for a week, and this morning you sound like you're coming apart." And I gripped the radio and I looked at the wall of shutters that I had not raised yet that morning, that I had left down past dawn for the first time, sitting blind in a lit box at 9 in the morning like a crazy man. And I wanted to tell her. I wanted to, so bad my throat hurt with it. And what I said was, "I'm fine, Peg, just not sleeping. I'll raise the shutters and get some sun." And she was quiet again, and then she said, "All right, but I'm going to check on you tonight." And she did. That night at 9, when I never talked to dispatch at night, the radio crackled, and Peg's dry voice came into the dark box and said, "Signal peak, you copy." And I about came up off the floor. And I keyed it and said, "I copy, Peg. All good." And she said, "Just checking on my boy," and signed off. And I sat there in the lamplight and cried a little, quiet, from the pure animal relief of a human voice. And I did not know yet that giving the thing outside a voice to listen to was the worst thing I could have done, because 2 nights later it started using one. The first voice it used was Peg's, and I think it used Peg's first because Peg's was the last new voice it had heard, coming out of the radio into the box where it could not quite reach. And it had listened the way it always listened, and it had taken what it wanted. It came a little after 2, which was always the hour, and it did not tap first that night. That was the change. It went straight to the voice. It came from the north shutter, low down, close to the wood, and it said, "Signal peak, you copy," in Peg's voice. Peg's dry screen door voice, the exact voice that had come out of the radio, only slowed down some, and thicker, like a record played a hair too slow, like the voice was being pushed out through something that was not built for making it. "Signal peak, you copy," and then it waited, the way it waited after the tapping, listening to hear what I would do. I did not copy. I sat in the middle of the floor with my back against the leg of the Osborne stand, and my knees pulled up and my hands over my mouth, and I did not make one sound, and inside my head I was saying the rule over and over. "Do not answer. Do not answer. That is not Peg. Peg is 14 miles away in a lit room. That is not Peg." And it said it again. "Signal peak, you copy." And then it did a thing that turned me to ice. It added the part Peg had added, just checking on my boy, in Peg's voice. A thing it could only have gotten by listening 2 nights ago, through the wall. And I understood that it had been out there listening the whole time. Every night, gathering me up, learning the shape of my little world so it could wear the pieces of it back at me. It ran through Peg's voice for maybe an hour. "Copy. You copy. Just checking on my boy. Cole, honey." It had that one, "Cole, honey," and it turned it over and over, getting it a little more right each time. And every time it got closer, I felt the wall between us get thinner, because the closer it came to being her, the more some starved part of me wanted to answer, wanted the human voice, wanted it so bad, and that was the trap. That was the whole trap. It did not want to break the door down, it wanted me to open it. Everything it did was aimed at getting me to open it myself. The tapping, the searching, the voice, it could not come in. I understood that by then. I understood it the way you understand the rule under the rule. It could not come in unless I let it in. And so its whole long patient work, night after night, was the work of finding the voice I would not be able to refuse. It went through the others after that. And my whole world by then, the little handful of it, it did my mother's voice one night, my mother who has been dead 11 years. and it did her calling me in from the yard the way she did when I was small. "Cole, supper, Cole, come in now." And I sat on the floor and shook and did not answer. It did a girl I knew in high school. It did the incident commander from the search, the man who asked me which drainage. It did his flat radio voice saying, "Which one, Merrick, which drainage?" And I bit down on my own hand until it bled to keep from answering that one, because that one had a hook in it. That one knew right where to reach. And it learned my name. That was the thing that came in around then in the middle of the voices, and it is the thing I have the hardest time explaining to anybody who was not there. At the start, it had called me Signal Peak, because that was what it had heard. That was what came out of the radio. But somewhere in those nights, it stopped calling me Signal Peak and started calling me Cole. And then it stopped calling me Cole and started calling me Cole Merrick, my whole name, which I do not think I said out loud one time that whole season, not once. There was no one to say it to. It got my name out of me some other way. Out of my sleep, maybe. Out of the 20-minute drops when I went under and dreamed the door dream. It reached in and took my name off me while I slept, and then it stood at the shutter in the 2 o'clock dark, and it said it back to me, soft, in whatever voice it was wearing that night, Cole Merrick. And each time it said it, I felt a little more found. That is the only word for it. Found. Like a thing that had been looking for me a long time had finally, definitely, got the address right. I stopped raising the shutters at all. Days went by that I did not see the sun, did not see the country I was paid to watch, sat in the blind box with the lamp burning down my propane and my food running low and my logs going to hell. Peg was frantic on the radio, or as frantic as Peg got, which was quiet and steady and would not let go. She had figured out something was bad wrong. She kept telling me she was going to send the district ranger up, a man named Del Hutchins, and I kept telling her, no, do not send anybody. I'm coming out of it. Give me a day. Because by then I had one clear, terrible thought fixed in my head, and the thought was this. If a man comes up here, it will get him. It cannot get in, but it can get a man on the stairs, a man on the catwalk, a man out in the open between the truck and the door. If Del Hutchins drives up that switchback and climbs my tower, it will do to him what it wanted to do to me, and it will be because I called him the way I called the search down the elbow, and I will have done it again. I will have sent one more person to the wrong place to die. So I told Peg no. Every morning that I could still hold a radio, I told her no. I'm fine, do not send anybody. And I could hear her not believing me. And I could hear her deciding how long she could stand to let me refuse before she overrode me and sent Del up regardless. And I was in a race I could not see the finish of, trying to last out whatever this was, before Peg's patience ran out and she sent a man up the mountain into it. I lost track of the days. I want to be able to tell you it was the 8th night, or the 10th, but the truth is the days had come loose from their numbers, the shutters down, the light always the same low lamp light. And I ate when I remembered, and slept in the little drops, and sat the rest of the time with my back to the Osborne, and my eyes on nothing, listening. My beard had come in. My hands had a shake I could not stop. I had stopped reading. The books were just paper. There was only the box, and the lamp, and the long wait for 2 o'clock, and then the voices, and then the gray crack of a dawn I only knew about because the birds started up in the trees below, the ordinary birds, whose sound had become the sweetest thing in my life. Because the birds meant it was over for another night. The birds meant it had gone back to wherever it went in the day. And I could put my head down on the floor and go under for a couple of hours without the door, dreamless, gone, until the light and the fear started it all again. And then came the night. It found the voice it had been looking for the whole time, the one it had been building up to through all the others, the way a man clears his throat and works up to the thing he really came to say. It had gone through my mother and Peg and the commander and the high school girl. It had saved the last one. It had known, I think, from the very first tap on the very first night, exactly whose voice would open the door, if any voice could. and it had made me wait for it, made me sit through all the others, so that when it finally came, I would have nothing left in me to hold the wall. It came a little after 2, from the north shutter, low and close to the wood, and it said my name the way she never got the chance to, because we never met while she was alive to say it, and it said, "Cole, Cole, it's Marla. I'm so cold. Please let me in." I have tried a lot of times to describe what that did to me, and I have never once gotten it right, so I will just tell you the plain of it. It was her voice. Not close to her voice, not a good copy. Her voice, the one I had never heard, the one I had built 1,000 times in the worst hours from the photo and the braid and the chipped tooth, the voice a 22-year-old girl would have, young, a little scared, trying to be brave about it. And it came through the shutter into my dark box, and it went into me all the way to the bottom, to the rotten board, to the place where I'd been keeping her all this time, and it set its weight there, and it pushed. I did not answer. I want that on the record before anything else. That night I did not answer. But I will not pretend. It was because I was strong. I did not answer because I had gone rigid, locked up. Every muscle in me pulled wire tight, and the not answering was not a choice so much as a seizure. My whole body clamped down on the sound trying to come up out of my throat, because the sound trying to come up out of my throat was her name. I wanted to say it. God help me. I wanted to say Marla. I wanted to say I'm here. I wanted to say I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I sent them down the elbow. You were up the cut bank the whole time, and I sent them down the elbow. And I could feel all of that pressing up behind my teeth. And the only thing that held it back was my own jaw locked shut, and the old rule running under it, do not answer, it is not her, it is not her. Because it was not her. I have to say that part too, and I have to believe it, because it is the only thing that lets me sleep now. Marla Vance died under a deadfall in the cut bank drainage, and whatever is left of her is at peace or is nothing, and it is not out on a catwalk 40 feet up a fire tower 14 miles from where she died, scratching at my shutter in the 2 o'clock dark. That was not Marla. That thing had never been Marla, and had never been Peg, and had never been my mother. It had only listened to them, and taken them, and put them on, the way a man puts on a coat off a hook, and the fact that the coat fit so well, the fact that it wore her so exactly it could break my heart, that was not because it loved her or knew her. It was because it was good at this. It had done this a long, long time. Longer than fire towers. Longer than the district and the maps and the roads. It was old at it the way water is old at finding the low place, and it had found mine. It stayed at the shutter all night. That was new too, the staying. It used to work an hour and go. That night it did not go. He kept on in her voice, low and steady and reasonable was the terrible part, because it did not wail and it did not beg wild. It talked to me the way a cold girl in real trouble would talk to the one person who could help her. "Cole, please. I've been out here so long, I know you can hear me. I'm right outside. I'm right here. All you have to do is lift the latch. It's so cold, Cole. You wouldn't leave me out in the cold. Not you. Not again. Not again." It found that. It found the exact words, and it slid them in, soft, not again, and I put both my hands over my ears and pushed until my head hurt, and I could still hear it. I could hear it through my own hands and my own blood. Patient, kind, unhurried, saying the thing that was built out of the very center of me, that I had left her in the cold once, and here was the cold again, and here she was in it again, and this time I could open a door and fix it. This time all it would cost me was to lift one latch and let the poor cold girl in, out of the dark. I did not lift the latch. The dawn came. The birds started in the trees, and the voice stopped between one word and the next, cut off clean, the way it always cut off clean when the light came. And I was still sitting against the leg of the Osborne stand, with my hands over my ears, and my face wet, and my jaw so tight it ached for 2 days after, and I stayed like that a long time after it was quiet, afraid to move, afraid it was a trick, afraid that if I took my hands down, the voice would still be there. But it was not. It was day. It was gone. I did not raise the shutters that morning. I could not make myself go out on that catwalk, not after the night, not with what might be waiting even in the day, though it never came in the day, and I told myself it never came in the day, and I still could not make my hands undo a latch. So I sat in the blind box and I missed my 9 o'clock check for the first time all season. That was what did it, in the end. That was the thing that made Peg send the ranger, and I knew it would, and I could not stop it, because I could not make myself pick up the radio either. 2 o'clock had broken something in me, and I sat in the dark all that day and did not eat and did not drink and did not key the radio, and I could feel the day going by outside the shutters. And I knew that 14 miles away in the district office, Peg was looking at the clock and the empty log and making the call she had been holding off making for a week. And I knew Dale Hutchins was going to get in a green Forest Service truck and drive up my mountain, and I could not lift a hand to stop him, and I sat there in a horror that was almost calm, the calm of a man watching a thing he set in motion roll down a hill toward a person he cannot warn. Dell got there a little before dark. I heard the truck a long way off, the engine working up the switchbacks, gearing down for the steep pitches, and then the door slammed down in the little clearing at the base of the tower, and then his voice, a real voice, a live human voice, coming up from the ground, calling up the stairs. Cole! Cole Merrick! You up there! It's Dell Hutchins! Peg sent me up! And it was so close to the thing at the shutter, a voice calling my whole name up out of the dark, that for one long second I could not tell them apart, and I did not answer him either. And I heard his boots start up the metal stairs, ringing, 40 feet of them coming up. When he came through the trap door into the box and saw me, he stopped with one boot still on the stair, and I watched his face do the thing a person's face does when they walk in on something a lot worse than they were braced for. Dell Hutchins was a big, calm man near 60 with a white mustache and hands like a couple of work gloves, and he had pulled I do not know how many people off that mountain in his years, the living ones and the other kind, and not much moved him, and I moved him. I saw it. I was a man with a 2-week beard sitting on the floor of a lit box with all 4 shutters down at dusk, surrounded by rotting food and a wall of wool jammed into every crack, and I had not said a word, and his face went from irritation to worry to something careful and quiet, the face you put on around an animal that is hurt and might bite. Cole, he said. Hey now. He came the rest of the way up and let the trapdoor down slow. What in the world, son? What's happened to you up here? And it all came out of me at once. Not clean, not in order, but it came out. Everything I had not said to Peg for 2 weeks. The tapping and the rhythm, and the shape and the shutter gap, and the finger marks on the glass 40 feet up, and the voices. Peg's voice, and my mother's voice, and the girl's voice, and I heard myself saying it, and I heard how it sounded, and I could not stop, and Dell crouched down in front of me with his big hands on his knees and let me get all of it out, and he did not laugh. I will give him that until the day I die. He did not laugh, and he did not tell me I was crazy. He listened. And when I ran down at last, out of breath, shaking, he was quiet a while, and then he said, All right, Cole, here's what we're going to do. We are going to raise these shutters and let some air in here, and I am going to fix you something to eat, and we are going to sit up together tonight, and in the morning I am going to take you down off this mountain. And if something comes and taps a window, well, there'll be 2 of us to hear it. All right? You're not alone up here anymore. That's the main thing. You're not alone. He reached for the latch of the north shutter. I got up off that floor faster than my knee has let me move in 20 years. I got a hand on his arm and I said, do not open it. Please, do not raise it. And something in how I said it stopped him, because a drowning man has a grip on him you do not argue with. He looked at me a long moment, and then he took his hand off the latch, slow, and he said, Okay, son. We leave them down. And I could see him deciding I was worse off than he had thought, and I could see him deciding to humor me through the night and get me to a doctor in the morning, and I did not care what he decided, as long as the shutter stayed down and he stayed inside the box until light. We sat up together. It was better with two, I will not pretend it was not. He got the little burner going and heated a can of stew and made me eat it and made me drink water. And the food and the water and the plain fact of another warm body in the box brought me back some enough that I started to feel the shame of it, the ordinary human shame of being seen at the bottom, and that shame was the most normal thing I had felt in 2 weeks, and I could have wept for it. He talked. He told me easy nothing stories, a elk hunt, a truck he was fixing, his daughter's kids, and his big, flat, calm voice filled the box and pushed the dark back, and for a couple of hours, the early hours, before 2, I let myself believe that maybe it had only ever been the alone, the way I first thought, and that with Dell there it would stay away, and that in the morning I would go down the mountain, and this would become a thing that happened to me once up on Signal Peak, the season I came apart. And then it got to be 2 o'clock, and it came. It came the way it had come the last few nights, straight to the voice, no tapping first, and it came from the north shutter, low and close to the wood, and it said, "Cole, it's Marla." I'm so cold. Dell went still. I saw the easy nothing story die in his mouth and his eyes come around to the north shutter, and I knew from his face that he heard it too, that this was not the alone and not in my head, that a girl's voice was coming through the wood of a shutter 40 feet up, an empty tower in the middle of the night, and I watched a lifetime of calm come apart on Dell Hutchins's face in about 4 seconds. "Who is that?" he said low. His voice had gone to a whisper. "Cole, who in the hell is that? Don't answer it," I said. "Whatever it does, don't answer it, and don't look at it, and do not touch that latch. That's the only rule. That's the only thing that matters. We do not answer, and we do not look, and we do not open anything, and when the sun comes up, it goes away. You hear me, Dell? You hear me?" And Dell, God love him, Dell nodded, because Dell had spent 30 years on this mountain, and some part of him knew, the way some part of me had known from the first night, the old part, the part under the part, that there are things you do not answer in the dark. He nodded, and he shut his mouth, and he took his hand off his own knee where it had been drifting toward the north shutter without him knowing it, the way a hand will, drawn, and he made a fist of it and put it in his lap. And the thing worked us all night. It knew there were 2 of us now. I do not know how it knew, but it knew, and it changed for it. It got cleverer, and it started going back and forth, working us both. It would do the girl's voice at the north shutter, "Please, Cole, please, it's so cold," and then it would go quiet, and then from the east shutter it would come in a different voice, a man's voice, a voice I did not know, but that Dell knew. I saw him flinch, some voice out of Dell's own life, calling Dell's name, and it worked him with it the same patient way it had worked me, low and reasonable, asking to be let in. It had listened to Dell come up the mountain. It had taken what it wanted off him too. It went back and forth between us all night, north to east and back, the cold girl for me and the other voice for Dell, and the 2 of us sat in the middle of the floor with our backs together, actually back to back, holding each other up, 2 grown men holding each other up on the floor of a fire tower, and we did not answer, and we did not look, and we did not touch the latches. And it went on, hour after hour, and it did not tire, and we did. And near the end of the night, the worst hour, the flat gray hour, just before the birds, when the dark is thinnest and a man is emptiest, it stopped using the shutters. It stopped going back and forth. There was a long quiet, the longest of the night, so long we both started to breathe again, and then we heard it start to climb. It came up the outside of the tower, not the stairs, the outside. We heard it take hold of the roof edge above the north shutter, a slow drag and grip, the sound of weight being pulled up the wall of the box from the catwalk to the overhang, and then it was on the roof, over our heads, and the whole tower is built so light that we felt it as much as heard it, the give of the boards taking a weight up there, moving. It crossed the roof slow. We turned our faces up and followed it with our eyes, the two of us tracking the give of the boards, the slow deliberate press of one point of weight and then another, the way a thing moves when it has too few legs for its size or too many. And it went to the center of the roof, right over the middle of the box, right over us, and it stopped, and it put its weight down, all of it. We heard the roof boards take the full load of it and creak long and low, and a little dust and dead flies sifted down out of the seams into the lamplight, and I understood that it was lying down up there, lying down on the roof of the box, full length, directly over us, the way a man lies down on ice to look through it at what is underneath. And then it did the thing that I still cannot lie in a dark room and think about. Even now, years down off the mountain, it started to tap again, from above, on the roof. Slow, over our heads, 3 and wait, 3 and wait, walking the taps across the boards from one side of the box to the other, and I knew, we both knew, that it was looking for the trap door. The one door in the whole box that was not a shutter and not a window. The one door that had no latch on the inside. Because a lookout does not need to lock the world out, only the weather. It was up there on its belly in the dark, tapping its way across the roof toward the only unlatched way into the box. And Dell and I got up off the floor and we put ourselves on the trap door, both of us, all our weight, sat right down on it side by side and held it shut with our own bodies. And above us the tapping found the edge of it and stopped, and something took hold of it from the top, and it began, slow and even, to lift. I will not tell you. It did not lift. It lifted the door against the weight of 2 grown men a full inch, and cold air came through the gap, and a smell came through the gap, the deer smell, the sweet turned deer smell, thick now, right in our faces, and out of the black gap came the girl's voice, close, right there, inches away, and it did not say please anymore. It had stopped saying please. It said, in her voice, low and certain and almost kind, Cole, open the door. You know you're going to. You've been going to since the first night. And I put my face down against the cold steel of the trap door with all my weight on it, and Dell's weight beside me, and I said the only thing I said to it the whole season, the only word I ever gave it, and I do not know where I found it, and I said, no. And the sun came up. I did not see it come up because we were sealed in the box, but the birds started in the trees below, all at once, the way they do, and the weight came off the trap door, and the smell thinned, and above us the roof boards gave up their load, 1 point of weight, and then another crossing back, and it went off the roof the way it had come, over the north edge, down the outside of the tower, and then there was nothing, and the box was just a box. And Dell and I sat on the trapdoor in the gray light, shaking against each other, and did not move for a long time. When there was real light in the seams of the shutters, Dell got up, and this time I let him. He worked the latch of the north shutter with his big hands not quite steady, and he swung it up, and the morning came into the box, gray and pink and enormous, the whole living country falling away below us, the fog lying down in the low places, the birds going, all of it ordinary and holy in there. And I made myself look at the outside of the north glass. I had to. I had to know. They were all over it. Handprints. Not one, not 4 fingers dragged down from the top. The whole north window, from the middle bar to the top edge and out onto the frame, was covered in them. Prints of a hand pressed flat against the outside of the glass, dozens of them, overlapping, some pointing up and some pointing sideways and some upside down, laid on from every angle a hand could come at that glass, and they were the wrong size, too long across the palm, the fingers too many joints, and they were pressed so hard into the cold glass that the shape of them had fogged and stayed, and here and there one of them was still wet, still running in the first sun. We went down the mountain that morning. Dell drove, and I sat with my head against the window glass of the truck and watched the timber go by, and neither of us said one word the whole 14 miles, and neither of us has said much about it since, though we have talked twice on the phone over the years, late at night both times, when neither of us could sleep, and both times we said the same few things and then ran out and just breathed at each other down the line for a while. Two men who had sat on a trapdoor together and then said goodnight. I never went back up. They found a younger man for Signal Peak the next season, and I heard he did fine, and I have never once had the nerve to ask Peg whether the younger man reported anything at his north window in the 2 o'clock dark, because I do not want the answer to be yes, and I could not stand for it to be no, because if it was only ever me, then it is still out there waiting for whoever will answer. And if it was only ever the mountain, then I do not get to be done with it just because I came down. I am mostly all right now, I want to say that. It has been a long time, and the days are mine again, and I do not sit up for 2 o'clock the way I did those first years back. I live in a little rented house on the flat outside of Chula. No towers, no timber to speak of, a streetlight I can see from the bed, and I sleep with the blinds down, all of them, every night. Out of a habit, I have stopped trying to explain to myself, and it is mostly all right. But there was a morning last October. I got up before light to put the coffee on, the hand mill, the $2 mill. I still have it, and I went past the kitchen window in the dark on my way to the burner, and I stopped, because the blind was up. Not all the way, a foot, raised a foot off the sill, even, level, the way a careful person raises a blind, and I stood in my kitchen in Chula in the dark, and looked at the foot of black glass under the raised blind, and I did not remember raising it. I do not raise the blinds. I have not raised a blind at night in years. And there was a mark on the outside of the glass, low, at the bottom of the pane, right down at the level of the sill where a thing would touch if it were down low, crouched, looking in under a blind that someone had raised a foot off the sill from the inside. 4 lines, dragged down, still, in the porch light, a little wet. The count came out at 18, and I stood on the catwalk with the binoculars going soft against my eyes and did it again. 17 was the number. 17 had been the number for 11 days running, the way a herd will settle into a place and hold there when the feed is good and nothing has spooked them. But the light was coming up gray-gold over the burn scar, and I counted the shapes down there in the young grass, and there were 18 of them, and the 18th one was standing off from the rest, up near the black line of the tree line, and it was not doing anything at all. I lowered the binoculars and wiped the lenses on the tail of my shirt and told myself it was the light. Told myself it was my eyes, which was the easier thing to say, because my eyes had been a subject with me for a while by then. I want to go back and start it right, because starting it there makes it sound like I already knew, and I did not know anything. I was a man drinking bad coffee at 5 in the morning, watching elk, doing the one thing Emmett Toller taught me to do 40 years ago, and I did not think it meant a thing. My name does not matter much to this. The district knew me as Halvard, which was my father's name and mine both, and on the radio I was Ash Ridge, because that is the name of the lookout. A 14 by 14 glass box on steel legs stood up on a spine of rock 9 miles from any road you would call a road. I had worked her for going on 30 seasons. That summer was to be my last one, and not because I wanted it that way. They had sent me the letter in March. The Forest Service does not fire a man my age, they retire him, which is a kinder word for the same door. 68 years old and my knees going and a hip that talked to me on the stairs, and somewhere in an office a person half my age had drawn a line and my name was on the wrong side of it. 1 more season, the letter said, in the friendly way of a thing that has already been decided. 1 more season, and then thank you for your years of service. I did not fight it. I would have once. What I did instead was drive up the mountain in the middle of June with my truck loaded to the springs, and I hauled my boxes up those steep steel stairs the way I had every June for 30 years, only slower, stopping on the landings to let the hip quiet down, and I set my life back up in that glass box 1 more time. The cot along the north wall, the propane ring, the little shortwave I was not supposed to have, and in the center of the floor, on its stand, the Osborne Firefinder, which is a brass ring the size of a dinner plate with a map of the whole district under glass and 2 sighting vanes you line up on a smoke to tell the office where it is. I dusted it off. I checked the sights. I signed the logbook the way you do. First entry of the season, Ash Ridge, in service, and I wrote the date and the weather and the wind. Here's the thing about my head that summer, the thing that has to be said or none of the rest sits right. It had started the winter before, down in town, in the little house I kept for the off-season. Small things. I would go to the kitchen for a reason and stand there with the reason gone, holding the doorframe, waiting for it to come back. I lost the word for the thing you strain spaghetti with. Stood at the sink, with it in my hand, this thing full of holes, and the word was just not there, and I had to call it the noodle basket to my own self, until 3 hours later, splitting kindling on the back step, the word colander dropped into my head like a coin into a slot. That one scared me more than I let on. A man can misplace his keys. A man does not usually misplace the plain names of things he has held his whole life. My sister Iris noticed at Thanksgiving. She did not say it as a worry. She said it as a joke. The way family does the frightening things, laughing. You told that same story twice, Hal, she said, word for word, and you didn't know it the second time. And I laughed too, because that is what you do. And then I went out to the truck for something I did not need, and I sat in the cold cab with my hands on the wheel for a while. I did not go to a doctor. I know how that sounds, but you have to understand what a doctor would have been. A doctor would have been the end of the mountain a year early. There is a physical you take to hold a lookout, and it is not a hard one, but they ask you questions. They have you count backward. They have you remember 3 words and say them back after they have talked to you about other things for a minute. Apple, penny, table. I had heard about the 3 words from a man I used to work with whose wife went through it, and I was afraid, plainly afraid, that I could not hold 3 words in my head for 1 minute anymore, and that if I let a doctor find that out, my last season would be taken from me the way everything else was being taken on schedule by people with my best interest in a folder. So I did not go. I came up the mountain instead, where the only test I had to pass was one I gave myself every morning at first light with a pair of binoculars. That was Emmett's rule, and I should say who Emmett was. Emmett Toller was the district ranger when I hired on, an old man even then, a Korea man with a face like a dropped map and hands that had been broken and set wrong more than once. He trained me my first 2 summers, driving up once a week with supplies and staying the night, and he taught me the firefinder and the radio and how to read weather off the western ridges, and he taught me the count. Every lookout has a thing, he told me. A thing you do to keep the days from running together up here, because they will, and a man who lets the days run together goes strange. He said it plain, no drama in it. Ours is the elk, he said. There was a herd works that burned scar below the ridge, has since the fire in '51 that made the scar, and every morning at first light you are going to count them. You are going to write the number in the log, not because the office cares. The office does not care about the elk. You do it for you. You count them and you write the number, and that is how you know the morning came, and you are still the man who counts them. I asked him what happens if the number is off. I was young. I thought it was a real question about elk, about wolves maybe, about a hard winter thinning the herd. Emmett was quiet for a while. We were on the catwalk. I remember the way he held the rail. If it comes out wrong, he said, and here he was careful with it. If some morning you count them and it comes out 1 too many, you do not stay to count a 3rd time. You come down the stairs, and you walk out to the road, and you keep walking, and you do not stop, and you do not look back at the burn. You leave the lookout, you leave the truck if you have to. You just go. I laughed at him. I was 28. I said, 1 too many elk, Emmett. That is called a calf being born. That is called the herd next valley over wandering in. He did not laugh with me. He said, "One too few is a wolf, or a winter, or a poacher, and that is the world, and you write it down, and you feel bad about it, and you go on. One too many is not the world." And that was all he would say. He looked at that burned scar the way you look at a stove you have been burned on, and then he changed the subject, and in 40 years he never brought it up again, and neither did I. I thought he was a superstitious old man giving a green kid a campfire story to keep him careful. Lookouts are alone a long time, and they build these little laws for themselves. Salt over the shoulder. Do not whistle after dark. Do not say the word for fire out loud on a red flag day. I filed it with those. I kept the count because it was a good habit and because it was Emmett's. And Emmett died the winter of 2009 in a VA bed 200 miles from any mountain, and I was one of 4 people at the service. And I kept the count partly for him after that, but I never once believed the other part. Not for 30 years. The herd that summer was 17 strong. I want that number clear because everything turns on it. 17, 14 cows, 2 calves born that spring, and a young bull with a rack still in velvet, who I had seen come up over 3 seasons. I knew them the way you know anything you look at every day. I knew the old cow that led them, the one with the torn left ear. And I knew the nervy one, who always fed at the edge and threw her head up at nothing. And I knew the cows, because there is nothing on this earth as easy to love as an elk calf in June, all legs and no sense. Every morning I got up in the dark, which is a thing that gets easier when you are old and your body has given up on sleep anyway. I put the pot on the propane ring. I took my coffee out onto the catwalk in whatever the night had left me, cold and wind most mornings, even in July, and I waited for the light to come up off the eastern rim and pour itself down into the bowl below the ridge, and when there was enough of it, I raised the binoculars and I counted the elk on the burned scar, and I went back inside and I wrote the number in the log. 17, 17, 17. 11 days of it, that stretch in early July. The herd settled and calm in the good grass, and me settled with them, an old man doing his one job well in his last summer, half at peace with the door closing, telling himself the peace was real. And then the morning I opened on, the gray gold morning when I counted them and it came out 18. I counted them a second time from the catwalk. I want to be honest about that, because Emmett said do not count a third time, and the truth is I did not believe I was anywhere near a third time. I was not even sure of the second. My hands were cold and the binoculars were an old pair, government issue. The rubber cracked on the right cup, and the light at that hour does tricks in the low ground where the mist sits. So I counted again, slow, moving left to right the way you learn to, taking each shape and setting it down in my head like laying out cards. 14 cows. Left to right along the middle of the scar where the grass came in thickest after the last burn. 2 calves in beside 2 of them. That was 16. The young bull off on his own to the south, near the runoff channel, head down. 17. My 17. Every one of them where they should be, doing what they should be doing. And then the 18th, up north, near the tree line, alone. I put the glasses on it and held them there until my arm shook. It was elk-shaped. I want to be plain about that. It stood the height of a cow elk, maybe a hand taller, the same dun color, going pale on the belly, the same long head. It stood in the grass at the top of the scar where the black snags of the old fire come down to meet the living trees, and it was not feeding and it was not moving. The others had their heads down, or were stepping the slow step of an elk that is not worried about anything in the world. This one held still. Its head was up, and I could not tell you which way it was facing, because at that distance and in that light, a still elk facing you and a still elk facing away looked near enough the same, and I stood there trying to decide which, and the light kept coming up, and the mist started to lift off the low ground, and I lost it against the trees. That is the thing about the first morning. Nothing happened. A man counted some elk and got a number 1 higher than the day before and could not get a clear look at the extra one before the herd drifted and the light changed. That is not a story. That is a Tuesday. I went inside and I stood over the logbook with the pen in my hand. Now. Here is where my own head comes into it, and I cannot get it out of it, not then and not now, and that is the whole trouble. Because I stood there, and I thought plainly in my own voice, what if it was 18 yesterday? And I wrote 17. What if it has been 18 for a while? I flipped back through the log, the pages soft and swollen the way they get from the damp up there, and there it was in my own hand, the neat column of it, 17, 17, 17. 11 mornings of my own careful writing. But a thing my sister had said was in the room with me. You told that same story twice, and you didn't know it the second time. And I thought, a man who can write 17 out of habit 11 mornings running is a man who might have written it on the 12th without counting at all, or counted wrong, or seen 18 and his tired hand put down the number it had been putting down all week. You see the trap. I could not tell whether the world had gone wrong, or I had, and there was no one up there to ask. That is the thing about a lookout that the postcards do not tell you. There is no one to check you against. You are the only instrument, and if the instrument is going, there is nothing to compare it to but itself. I wrote 18. I made myself do it, because whatever the truth was, 18 was what I had counted, and Emmett taught me, you write what you count, not what you expect. 18. I wrote, and then, because I was a careful man and this was a strange thing, I wrote a note beside it. Small, one extra up end by tree line held still, Poss elk from over ridge. Poss my eyes. Poss my eyes. I underlined that part. I do not know why. Maybe so that later, if it turned out to be nothing, I would have proof I had suspected myself first. A man building a case, and the man he was building it against was himself. I got on the district radio at the regular morning check-in. You call in your name and your weather and anything of note, and there is a woman named Carol Denny who runs dispatch out of the district office and has for years a good voice, a steady one, the kind of voice you are glad of when you are the only person on a mountain. I gave her my weather. Clear, wind out of the southwest at 8, no smoke on the horizon in any quarter. And I sat there with my thumb on the button, and I did not tell her about the 18th elk. I told myself it was not a fire matter, and dispatch is for fire matters. That was true, and it was not the reason. The reason was that the only way to say it was to say either there is a strange animal on my burn scar, which sounded like nothing, or I counted my elk wrong and I am afraid of what that means, which I was not going to say into a radio to a woman who would have to write it in a log of her own. So I said, Ash Ridge clear, nothing further, and I let go of the button. 10-4, Ash Ridge, Carol said. Have a good one, Hal. And the radio hissed and let her go. The day went the way a lookout day goes, long and bright and empty in the good way. I glassed the ridges for smoke every hour, the way you do. I walked the catwalk all four sides once an hour to keep the hip working and the eyes moving. I got through some of a western paperback with the cover gone. I ate a sandwich standing up, and the whole day, every time I came around the catwalk to the north side, I put the binoculars on that spot at the top of the burn scar where the black snags come down to the living trees. And every time there was nothing there but the grass moving in the wind and the dead trees standing, the way dead trees stand. By afternoon the herd had drifted south and west, down toward the runoff, the way they did most days, when the sun got high, and I counted them again out of a nervousness I would not have admitted to. And I got 17. Just 17. Everyone I knew. The torn-eared cow, the nervy one, the calves, the young bull. 17, calm as milk, and no 18th anywhere on the scar. That should have settled me. It did settle me, some. I thought, there. It wandered off. It was an elk from the next drainage that came over the ridge and stood a while and went home. And this morning I was tired and the light was bad and I built a haunted house out of one confused animal and my own worries. That is what I thought, standing on the catwalk in the good afternoon light with 17 elk feeding below me, and I believed it. Mostly, the way you believe the doctor when he says it is probably nothing. But there was a small thing that would not lie down, the splinter of it. In the morning, the 18th had been up north by the trees, alone, still, head up. And the 17 I knew, my 17, they had been down in the middle and south, feeding calm, all day. Whenever the herd was on the scar, the 17 I knew stayed low and south. And the top of the scar, that black seam where the burn met the trees, stayed empty, as if there were a part of the ground the elk I knew did not go, and the only thing I had ever seen stand in it was the thing I could not count as one of my own. I did not think that clearly, then. I want to be honest, I thought it the way you think a thing in the body, before the head will take it, a coldness low down. Not wanting to look at that part of the tree line as the light went, I closed the log on 18 and my little underlined note, and I told myself tomorrow would be 17 again, and this would be a funny thing I did not even mention to Iris. That night I slept badly, which was nothing new. The wind came up after dark, a real wind, the kind that finds every loose screw in a steel tower and works it, and the whole box sang and ticked and shifted the way it does. Sounds I had slept through for 30 years. I lay on the cot and listened to the tower talk to itself, and I thought about apple, penny, table. I tried to hold them. I said them over. And somewhere in the holding, I fell asleep. And if I dreamed, I did not keep it, and the alarm I did not need woke me in the dark before the light, the way it had every morning of my life up there, to go and count. In the morning it was 17. I have to put that down, because it is the truth, and because it is the cruelest part. The next morning I stood on the catwalk with my coffee going cold, and I counted the herd on the burn scar, and there were 17 of them, my 17. The torn-eared cow, and the nervy one, and the 2 calves, and the young bull, all down low and south in the good grass, feeding. I counted twice out of habit, and it was 17 both times. The top of the scar was empty. The trees were just trees. I wrote 17 in the log, and I felt the whole strange business let go of me, the way a cramp lets go. There. An animal wandered in and wandered out. An old man had a bad morning with bad light and a bad head and talked himself halfway into a ghost. I even smiled about it, standing up there. I thought, this is how it starts. The going strange Emmett warned about, not with a monster, but with a man alone too long who cannot tell his tired eyes from the truth, and I had better watch that in myself this last summer and not let the quiet get into me. For 4 days it was 17. 4 good mornings. 17, 17, 17, 17, and I wrote them down, and I meant them. And the 18th morning was a thing I had nearly filed away with the salt over the shoulder and the knot whistling after dark. It was the 5th morning that the herd stood wrong. The count was right. That is the part that has to stay straight. 17. I counted them, and there were 17, and I want no confusion about that. Because it was not the number that was wrong that morning, it was the way they stood. I had the binoculars up, and I was laying them out left to right, my cards, and about a third of the way through I felt the wrongness before I could name it, that cold low down again, and I lowered the glasses and looked with my bare eyes at the whole scar at once, the way you have to sometimes when a thing is too big to see through a narrow tube. They were all facing the same way. Elk do not do that. I have watched elk every morning for 30 years, and a herd at feed is a scatter, some north, some south, heads down, a cow watching one way while her calf faces another. The whole loose, easy geometry of animals that feel safe. A herd all facing one direction is a herd that has heard something. And when elk hear something, they do not just face it. They go tense all over. They lift their heads. They get ready to run. And inside a few seconds, they either spook or they go back to feeding. These did not spook, and they did not go back to feeding. They stood in the young grass, all 17, and every one of them was faced the same way, north and a little east, toward the top of the scar where the black snags come down to meet the trees. Heads up, not tense the way a spooked elk is tense. Just faced that way, still, like filings pulled around to a magnet, and holding it, longer than any animal holds anything. I put the glasses on the spot they were facing, the top of the scar, the seam of black and green. There was nothing there I could see. Grass and the dead trees and the wind moving both. And the herd faced it. I stood on the catwalk and I counted them again, and it was 17, and I made myself say it out loud in the empty morning. 17, my own 17, no extra, nothing wrong with the number. Only the number was not the point anymore, and I knew it. I stood there for a long time, I do not know how long. That is one of the fear tells. Emmett never told me that one, but I have learned it since. That time comes off its spool when you are afraid and you look at your watch and it is gone. When I came back into myself, the coffee was cold enough to have a skin on it, and my arms ached from holding the glasses. And down on the scar the herd had finally broken and put their heads down and gone back to being elk, scattered and easy, facing every way, and the morning was just a morning. I did not write it in the log. There is no column for the way they stood. I wrote 17, which was true, and I sat with the pen a while, and then I wrote, small under it, all faced end together, long time, no cause seen. And I looked at that and I thought about how it would read to another man some winter, some ranger, going through an old lookout's logs, and how it would read like exactly the kind of thing a man writes in the last summer before they take his mountain, when the days run together and the quiet gets in, and I almost scratched it out, but I did not. I left it. You write what you count. That was the day I started watching the top of the scar, the way you watch a thing you are afraid of, not steady. A man cannot watch a thing steady. It wears him out. And worse, when you stare at one spot too long in bad light, your eye starts to hand you things, movement that is not there, shapes swimming up out of the dead trees. So I watched it the way you watch a mirror in a dark house, in glances, coming around the catwalk each hour and putting the glasses on that seam and taking them off. And for 2 more days, there was nothing to see. The count held at 17. The herd fed and scattered and faced every way, and I began, the way a man will, to reach for the ordinary story again, that it had passed, that whatever it was had moved on the way it came. Then the count went to 18 and stayed. This is the part where the days stopped being separate from me, and I have tried since to put them back in order, and I am not always sure I have it right, and that cannot be helped, because it is part of the true shape of the thing. Somewhere in the second week of it, the 18th came back, and this time it did not leave. I counted them one gray morning and got 18, and the 18th was up north again, at the top of the scar, near the trees, alone and still with its head up while the others fed low and south. And I thought, all right, it is back, the wanderer is back, and I put the glasses on it to make myself look at it plain and prove it was an elk. And it was elk-colored and elk-sized and elk-shaped, and it stood there, and I could not make it feed. I watched it for a long time. Every other animal on that scar put its head down to the grass and lifted it, and stepped, and put it down again. The endless slow work of an elk making a living. The 18th never lowered its head. It stood at the top of the scar with its head up, and it faced down the slope toward the herd, toward me, and it held. I told myself, a sick elk will do that. A hurt one, an old one that is dying on its feet the way they do. That was a good story, and I held on to it hard. A sick elk come over the ridge to die, and the herd giving it room the way animals do, staying low and south, wanting no part of it. That explained the empty top of the scar. That explained the 18. It even explained, if I did not look at it too closely, the way they had all faced north that morning, an animal in distress, a smell, a sound, elk are more than we know. I wrote 18. I wrote, sick or hurt animal, top of scar, not feeding, herd keeping south. I got on the radio for the morning check-in, and I gave Carol Denny my clean weather, and again I did not say a word about it. And again, the reason, underneath the reason, was that I could not say it without saying the other thing, the thing about my eyes, my head, the three words I might not be able to hold. Apple, penny, table. I said them to myself after I let go of the radio button. I got table and I got apple, and I sat there a bad long minute before penny came. And when it came, I was not even sure it was the right third word, or just a word my mind had put there to stop the ache of the gap, and that not being sure was worse than the elk, much worse. The elk was down on the scar where I could put glasses on it. The gap was inside the only instrument I had. The sick elk story lasted about 3 days. It lasted because I fed it. Every morning the count was 18, and every morning the 18th was at the top of the scar. Still, head up, not feeding. And every morning I said, "The sick one, poor thing," and wrote it down. And a dying animal that will not lie down for 3 days is not the strangest thing I have seen in the mountains. I have seen a cow elk stand over a dead calf for a day and a half. Animals grieve and animals suffer, and both of those take a long, ugly time. So I let it be a sick elk, and I kept an eye on it, the way you watch a thing you expect to find dead one morning, half dreading and half wanting it done. But a dying elk goes downhill. It sags. Its head drops even if it will not feed. Its legs go. It stands splay-footed. It lists. And finally, one morning it is a mound in the grass with ravens on it. This one did not go downhill. Day to day, it did not change at all. Same place, near enough. Same height. Head up, always up. It did not sag and it did not list, and no bird ever went near it, and the birds were the first thing I could not fold back into a story. There is a hawkworks that Scar, a red-tail, has for years, and there are ravens always, and turkey vultures come through in July riding the thermals off the rock. A hurt animal on open ground pulls birds the way a cut pulls flies. They come and they sit in the dead trees, and they wait, and they get bold. Around my 18th, there were no birds. Not sitting near it, not riding over it. I watched a vulture come down the length of that scar one afternoon, low, working the updraft, doing the lazy tilting circles they do, and when it came level with the top of the scar where the 18th stood, it put on a wing beat, one hard climbing wing beat, and slid off east and did not come back. Birds knew something about the top of that scar. The elk knew it too. My 17 stayed low and south every hour of every day now, and the top of the scar, that black seam, had become a country my herd did not enter and no bird crossed. The morning the story finally broke, it broke over how the thing moved. Because it did move, that morning. It had held so still for so many days that I had half stopped believing it could. And then that morning I had the glasses on it, cold and steady, braced against the rail, the way you learn to. And it moved. And every part of me that had been building sick elk stories went quiet all at once, the way a room goes quiet. An elk that turns the way a thing on 4 legs turns. It steps. The front end comes around, and the back end follows. A shifting of weight through 4 points. A little clumsy and entirely of the ground. The movement of an animal that is mostly leg and neck and belly, and has to negotiate with all of it to face a new way. I have seen that 10,000 times and never once looked at it, the way you never look at a thing you have always known. This turned like the top half of it decided to face me, and the bottom half was just where it happened to be standing. I do not know a better way to say it, and I have tried. It came around toward the tower, and the turning started up high, at the head and the shoulders, and it came around smooth and all at once. No step in it, no shifting of the weight, no negotiation. The way you would turn if you were standing at a rail and heard your name and turned your head and your shoulders to see who called. The legs did not do anything. The legs were where the legs were. The top of it faced me across all that distance, and I felt it face me. Felt it the way you feel a person come up behind you in an empty room, that pressure on the back of the neck that has no name and needs none. Only I was feeling it through a pair of binoculars across the better part of a mile, and I took the glasses down from my eyes because my hands had started going, and I did not want to see it any nearer than that. I stood on the catwalk in the full morning light, and I was shaking, an old man shaking, and I said out loud, "That is not right. That is not how an elk moves." And hearing my own voice say it made it worse. It made it real, and to be truthful, I thought of Emmett. I thought of Emmett Toller holding the rail on this same catwalk 40 years ago, saying one too many is not the world. And I thought, for the first time since I was 28, that the old man had not been giving a green kid a campfire story, that he had known something, that he had seen it, or that someone before him had, and it had gone down look out like the firefinder in the radio calls, a piece of the job nobody wrote in the manual, because you cannot write it in a manual. You can only say it to the next man on the catwalk and hope he is not too young and sure to hear you. And right on the back of that thought came the other one, the one that lived in me all that summer, the one I could never kill. It came in my own voice, flat and reasonable, and it said, "Or you are a 68-year-old man alone on a mountain who has been losing words since Thanksgiving, and you have just seen an ordinary elk turn its head, and your mind, which you already do not trust, which could not hold 3 words for 1 minute, has dressed it up into a thing that moves wrong. Because a mind that is going does not go all at once. It goes like this, in the morning, in the bad light, with a story it likes better than the truth." There it was. Both of them true at once, and no way to weigh one against the other, and no one on the mountain to ask. If I called Carol Denny and said there is an animal on my scar that turns wrong, she would send someone up to check on the old man, and they would come with kind faces and a clipboard, and they would ask me the date and the day of the week, and to remember 3 words, and my last season would be over, and the 18th would still be down there, whether I passed their test or not. And if I did not call, I stayed alone with it, the 2 stories eating each other, and every morning had to count again. So I did the only thing left to a man in that spot, which was to try to prove it to myself, one way or the other, past doubting. I decided I would settle it with the firefinder. The Osborne firefinder is a machine for being sure. That is the whole idea of it. When a lookout sees a smoke, he cannot just say it is over that way, because over that way is 100 square miles of timber, and a fire doubles while you are being vague about it. So he goes to the firefinder and he lines the 2 sighting vanes up on the smoke, the near one and the far one, a peep and a blade like the sights on a rifle laid flat across that brass ring, and the ring is marked in degrees all the way around, and where the line falls he reads the bearing, and he calls it inexact. It does not care how you feel. It does not care if you are tired or old or scared. It gives you a number, and the number is true, and 2 lookouts with 2 firefinders can cross their numbers and put a pin on a fire in country neither of them can walk to. It is the most honest thing in the building. I thought, if I put the firefinder on the 18th every morning and write down the exact bearing, then I will know. If the bearing is a little different every day, it is an animal, animals move, and I am a frightened old fool. And if the bearing is the same to the degree, day after day, then no animal is doing that, because no animal stands on the same spot to the degree for a week, and then it is a real thing and not my head. And I will know that too, and I will do what Emmett said. That this seemed like a good and steady plan shows how far gone I already was, that I was going to use the tool for locating wildfires to take the bearing of a thing standing among my elk. But it was steady in its way. It was a man trying to find one solid floorboard to stand on. And there is this, which I did not let myself think in words at the time. A part of me wanted the bearings to come out the same, wanted it, because a real thing on the scar, however wrong, was a thing outside me, and I would rather have been haunted than be losing my mind. That is a terrible thing to know about yourself, and I know it about myself now. So I did it. Every morning after the count, I went to the firefinder in the center of the floor, and I swung the far vane around to the top of the scar, and I brought the 18th up between the blade and the peep, centered it, held my breath the way you do, and I marked the bearing off the ring, and I wrote it in the log under the count. And the numbers themselves do not matter, because they were bearings in degrees, and a bearing is only a bearing. What matters is that they were the same, morning after morning, to the half degree, the same. The 18th stood on one spot at the top of the burn scar, and it did not drift, and it did not wander, and an elk cannot do that. No living thing that has to eat and drink can do that, and the firefinder, which does not care how I feel, told me so in the one language it has, and I wrote the bearing down 5 mornings running, and every morning it was the bearing from the day before. I should have walked out then. I know that. Emmett said one too many and go, and here was one too many for 5 mornings and a machine to prove it, and I did not go. There is a reason I did not go, and it is not a good reason, but it is the true one. It is because the count was still 18, one too many. And Emmett's rule was for one too many, and here was one too many. But the trouble was that the one too many was standing still at the top of the scar where I could see it and account for it. And my 17 were still down south, all 17, alive, feeding mine. And a man tells himself, as long as I can see all 17 of mine, and the extra one keeps its distance up there at the trees, then the rule has not really come due. Then I am watching it, and watching it is not the same as it coming from me. I made a deal with the rule. I would count, and I would keep both eyes on the thing, and the day it came down off the top of the scar toward my herd, that was the day I would walk, not before. I had 1 season left, and I was not going to throw it away and let them be right about the old man for a bearing on a brass ring. That was the deal I made. The thing on the scar kept a different one. It was the 9th or 10th morning of the 18, and again, my hold on the order of those days is not what I would like, and I have gone over it and over it, that I raised the glasses on the top of the scar, and the 18th was not standing where it stood. For a bad second, I thought it was gone, and the relief that went through me was so big it frightened me on its own. And then I found it, and I brought the glasses up, and I have never in my life had my body do what it did then. It stood at the far top of the scar, right at the seam where the black snags meet the living trees, in the shadow under the first of them, and it was standing on 2 legs. I do not mean it had reared, the way a bull will rise up on his hind legs to fight or to reach a branch, front legs pawing, that heavy rocking back that lasts a second or two before the animal comes down, because it is an animal and the ground is where it lives. I mean, it stood the way a man stands, easy, upright, weight settled, no effort in it, the front legs, the arms, the whatever they were, down at its sides. It stood among the black snags at the top of the burn scar where an elk should be on 4 legs, and it was up on 2, tall, still, its head, which I could not make myself look at through the glasses, up there at the height a man's head would be if the man were taller than any man, and it faced down the slope at the herd, at the 17, at mine. The glasses went out of my hands. I did not drop them on purpose. My hands opened. They hung on the strap around my neck and knocked against the rail, and I stood with both hands on the rail holding myself up, because the catwalk had gone soft under me, and I looked at the top of the scar with my bare eyes, and at that distance, without the glasses, it was just a tall, pale mark standing in the shadow of the trees, a dead trunk maybe, a burned snag standing where 100 burned snags stood. And that is the thing. That is the whole engine of it, right there. Without the glasses it could have been a tree. With the glasses it was standing on 2 legs facing my herd, and I could not make myself raise the glasses again to be sure. And even if I had, I no longer trusted what the glasses showed me, because a man whose mind is going sees standing men in burned trees. That is a known thing. They call it a name. I cannot now recall the mind making faces and figures out of nothing, because the mind is built to find the man in the trees, and a broken mind finds him where he is not. So which was it? I stood on the catwalk and I could not tell you. I still cannot. A tall, pale thing stood at the top of my burn scar on 2 legs, or a burned tree stood where burned trees stand, and a failing old man dressed it in legs. Both of those are true stories, and I was the only instrument on the mountain, and the instrument did not trust itself. I started counting more than once a day after that. That is the thing a man does when he cannot trust his own count. He counts again, and then he counts the count, and it does not help. It has never once helped anyone, but you do it. Morning count, and then a count at mid-morning when the herd moved to water, and a count at noon, and one in the long gold of late afternoon, and one at last light before the scar went dark, and I wrote them all in the log now. A column of numbers going down the day, and some hours it was one thing and some hours another, and I could not tell you if the herd was truly changing under me or if the counter was. The pen got hard to hold steady by evening, and every count, whatever it came to, I put the firefinder on the top of the scar after, and took the bearing of the still thing at the trees, and wrote that too, the same bearing, always the same bearing, the one honest number, on a page full of numbers I could not swear to. For the first time all summer, I did not write what I counted. I stood at the log with the pen, and I could not make my hand put down 2 legs, tree line, standing, because if anyone ever saw it, that was the line that would end me. That was the sentence they would circle. I wrote 18. Only 18. And then I closed the book, and I got on the radio, and when Carol Denny said, "Good morning, Hal, how are you up there?" I said, "Fine, Carol, quiet up here." And my voice came out of me wrong, too high and too careful. A stranger's voice sang my dispatcher's name, and there was a pause on the line, just a beat, and she said, "You sure you're all right?" And I said, "Just tired, long season." And she let it go, and I sat there after with my hand over my mouth. After that, the count started coming down, and I would give anything for it to have gone the other way. One too many I could hold. One too many was Emmett's rule, and even breaking it I understood it. But the morning after the 2 legs I counted, and the 18th was up top, upright or not upright, tree or not tree, I made myself not decide, and I counted my herd down south, my 17, and I got 16. 16 in the extra. 16 of mine and the thing at the top. I counted 3 times, and I know what Emmett said about the 3rd count, but Emmett's rule was for 1 too many, and this was the opposite. This was 1 too few and 1 too many at the same time. And there is no rule for that, because I do not think it had happened to any lookout before who lived to teach the next one, 16. And I went down the herd, my cards, and I found which one was gone. It was the nervy cow, the one who fed at the edge and threw her head up at nothing. And of all of them, she was the one I would have bet on to last, because she was the one who was always watching, always ready, the one whose whole life was being the first to know. She was gone off the scar, and there was no kill, no ravens, no drag, nothing on the open ground, and the top of the scar had one thing standing on it, same as before. And now the herd was 16. The next morning it was 15, and the young bull was gone. I stopped sleeping around then, or what sleep I got was not the kind that helps. I would lie on the cot, and the tower would tick and sing in the wind, and I would count in the dark, not elk. I would count the 3 words, apple, penny table, and the days of the week, and the presidents, and the names of the 14 cows. I had made up private names for over 3 seasons, and I would lose the thread and start again, testing the instrument, checking myself against myself all night in the dark, and I never once came up sure. Some nights I could not get penny. Some nights I could not remember whether the nervy cow had gone the first morning or the second. And the not being sure poured itself into the elk, and the elk poured itself back into the not being sure, until I could not have told you where the mountain ended and my own failing began. And maybe that was the true horror of it, the one Emmett could not have warned me about, because Emmett's mind was sound to the end. That the thing had found the one man on the mountain who could not tell it apart from himself. That it had come, if it had come at all, in the one season, I had no way to be sure. It was not just me. 14, 13, one of the calves went, and I sat down on the floor of the lookout when I counted the calves, and there was one, and I put my back against the leg of the firefinder stand, and I stayed there a while. The count was coming down toward the herd, and the one at the top of the scar was always there, and it was always 18 if you counted it in, 16 in it, 15 in it, 14 in it, as if the total wanted to be 18, as if it were, not that my elk were vanishing, but that they were being gathered, that the number 18 was the true number now, and the thing at the top was collecting the difference between my herd and its number one animal at a time. I know that is not sense. That is how it sat in me at 3 in the morning, that the count was not falling, that the count had never really been 17, that 18 was what it had always been, and I had just been slow, all summer, all my life maybe, to see the 18th standing there at the edge of everything I loved, patient, waiting for me to be old enough, and alone enough, and unsure enough to be counted in. I stopped writing the numbers with any note. Just the number. 13. 12. The log got plain those last days, one number a morning in a shaking hand, and I think if you found it now, that run of falling numbers with no word beside them, you would know without being told that something had gone wrong up there, the way a heart monitor tells you without a word. And here is the thing that finally broke my deal, the deal I had made with the rule, that I would walk the day it came down off the top toward the herd. 'Cause it never did come down toward the herd. That was the trick of it, and I did not see the trick until it was too late to matter. It stayed at the top of the scar, still, upright, at the trees, and it never took one step down toward my elk. It did not need to. The elk went anyway, one a night, gone off the scar with no kill and no sign, and the thing just stood there and got closer to its number, and I kept my part of the bargain like a fool, watching the top of the scar for a movement toward the herd that was never going to come, because the movement when it came was not going to be toward the herd at all. It was going to be toward me. I worked that out on the morning the count came to 12. The torn-eared cow gone. The old cow that led the herd. The one with the torn left ear I had known longest of all of them. Gone in the night, off open ground, and 11 of mine left, and the thing at the top. 12 all told, and me at the rail with the glasses I no longer trusted, and I understood, the way you understand the last step of a thing you should have seen from the first, that when the elk ran out, the count would not stop, that it had never been about the elk, that the elk were only what was between me and the number, the way the good grass and the miles and the dead trees were between me and the number, and one by one the things between us were going, and I was the last thing on the mountain that could be counted, and the burn scar below the tower had been getting shorter all summer, closing the distance, one elk at a time, up the slope, toward the stairs. I decided that day I would leave in the morning, not walk out with nothing, the way Emmett said. I told myself I was smarter than that Emmett's rule was a scared old man's rule, and I would do it sensible. Pack the truck at first light, radio Carol that I was coming down sick, drive out the 9 miles of ruts to the road and not come back, and let them retire me a month early, let them win. I did not care any more about winning. I would go in the morning, in the light, with my truck, not in the dark. A man does not go down 9 miles of mountain road in the dark to get away from a thing he is not even sure is there. That was the last deal I made with it, and it broke that one the way it broke the others, by not waiting for the terms. It came in the night. I do not know the hour. The clock was one more thing I could not trust, and I had stopped looking at it. It was full dark, and the wind had died, which should have told me, because the wind never fully died up there, and the tower had gone quiet. All its ticking and singing stopped. Quiet the way a room goes quiet when someone has come into it and is standing dead still. I lay on the cot, and I listened to the tower not make a sound, and I knew, the way the elk had known, the way the birds had known, before I heard anything, that the top of the scar was empty now, and the thing that had stood on it had come. Then the stairs took a weight. You know the stairs of a tower by heart when you have climbed them 30 years. Steel, switchback flights, a landing at each turn, and every flight has a voice, a certain give and ring under a boot, and I had gone up and down them 10,000 times, and I knew them asleep. A weight came on to the bottom flight. Not a footstep the way a man makes a footstep, not the ring of a boot. A weight settled onto the steel, The whole flight, taking it at once and giving the way it gives, and then the next, higher, closer, and there was no rhythm to it, no left and right, no climbing sound, just the flights taking weight, one after another, coming up, and between them nothing, no scrape, no breath, no sound at all, and the nothing was the worst of it. The tower, dead silent between one flight bearing weight and the next flight, higher bearing weight, coming up out of the dark toward the glass box where I lay. I did not turn on the lamp. I would like to say I did something brave or smart, and I did not. I sat up on the cot in the dark, and I could not move past that. I sat there with my feet on the cold floor and my hands on my knees, and I listened to it come up my stairs. And I could not have told you if my heart was going, because I could not feel it. I could not feel much of anything. The fear had gone all the way through into that cold, still place, past fear where the body just waits. It reached the catwalk. The whole tower took its weight, one long settling of the steel, and then the boards of the catwalk outside took it, and it came around the catwalk, around the outside of the glass box, unhurried, the boards giving under it, past the north windows, past the east, and I sat on the cot in the dark, in the middle of the floor, and I turned my head to follow the sound of it going around me, around the glass, all four sides, the way I walked the catwalk every hour of every day, once around, checking. It was walking my round. It came around to the door side, the west, and the boards outside the door took a weight and held it, and it stopped. There was a shape against the glass of the door. I could see it because there was a little starlight, no moon, and against the faint gray of the sky through the glass there was a darker place, tall, up near the top of the door where the glass runs. At the height a head would be if the man were taller than any man, and it did not move, and I did not move, and the tower did not make one sound, and I sat there in the dark 6 feet from it with a pane of glass and a hook latch between us, and the count that morning had been 12. I do not know how long. Time had come all the way off the spool. I sat and it stood, and neither of us moved, and the mountain held its breath, and somewhere in that long nothing a thing came up in me that I have not got a name for, not courage, closer to the thing that makes you finally answer a phone that has been ringing too long, and I got up off the cot. My legs were there. That surprised me. My legs were under me, and they took me across the floor in the dark, not to the door, past it, to the fire finder in the center of the room. And I put my hand on the cold brass ring of it the way you put your hand on a friend's shoulder, and I do not know why I went to it except that it was the one honest thing in the building and I wanted to be touching it. And I looked at the door, at the shape against the glass, and I made myself, one last time, do the thing I had done every morning of my life up there, the thing Emmett gave me, the only thing I had. I counted the shape at the door. One thing at my door. And then I did the sum I had been doing all those falling mornings, the 11 elk still on the scar, and this, and it came to 12, the same 12 I had counted at dawn, and I understood that it had not added itself to the world by coming up my stairs. It had been in the count already. It had always been in the count. The 12 at dawn had included the thing now standing at my door. I had counted it that morning without knowing which of the shapes it was. It was already one of mine, and a sound came out of me in the dark, not a word, and my hand tightened on the brass ring, and the shape at the door did not move, and I said, out loud, in a voice I did not know, I said, "Emmett." I said his name in the dark like it was a question, like the old man could answer it from wherever he had gone, and of course nothing answered, and the shape stood at the glass, and the latch on the door was a little hook of brass that a child could break and did not touch it. It did not need to. It stood at my door and it waited, patient as it had been all summer at the top of the scar, and I understood that too, standing there with my hand on the fire finder. It was not going to come in. It had never come for any of them. The nervy cow, the young bull, the torn-eared cow, they had not been taken. There had been no kill, because there had been no taking. They had gone to it. One a night, off open ground, no dragon, no sign, because the thing that has been counted goes to the count on its own legs, and it was my turn now, and it was not going to break my door. It was going to wait for me to walk out to it. I do not remember opening the door. That is the truth, and it is the worst of the truth. I have gone back over that night more times than I have gone back over anything in my life, and it stops there, with my hand on the brass ring and the shape at the glass, and my own voice saying Emmett into the dark. And then it stops, the way the tape stops, the way a word stops when you reach for it, and there is nothing where it was. The next thing I have is gray light, and my boots wet through and cold to the shin, and the smell of the burn scar around me, that smell of old ash and green grass that comes up out of a fire scar for 50 years. And I was standing in the young grass at the top of the scar, at the seam where the black snags meet the living trees. On the spot I had put the firefinder on morning after morning, the spot where the 18th had stood all summer with its head up, and I was facing down the slope, down toward the tower. I do not know how I got there. 9 flights of stairs and 200 yards of open ground in the dark, and I have none of it. Maybe I walked out to it the way Emmett said you must never walk out. Maybe an old man whose mind was going walked in his sleep and awoke on the mountain the way such men do, and there was never anything at all, only me and the wet boots, and the falling elk that a hard summer and a wolf could explain, and a head that had been unspooling since Thanksgiving. Both stories were still true. They are true now. I have never been able to weigh one against the other, and I have stopped trying to, mostly. They found the truck still parked. They found the log open on the table to a last entry in my hand, a number and nothing else, and I have never asked which number, because I do not want to know if it was 12 or if it was 1. I do not count anything now. They put me somewhere I do not have to. There is a window, and beyond it, there are no mountains, which is a mercy. And there are people who bring me 3 words in the morning: apple, penny, table, or maybe they are different words. I could not swear to it, and they ask me to say them back, and I do not, because I know now what a count is for, and I will not do their count for them. I will not stand at the rail and lay the shapes out like cards for anyone ever again. But some mornings, early, in the gray before they come, I look at the window and I count, not out loud. I go down the herd in my head, the ones I had names for, the torn-eared cow and the nervy one and the young bull, and I count them the way I counted them every morning of 30 years, and the number is different every time, and I can never get it to come out right, and I do not know anymore how many mornings I have counted or which morning I am counting, or whether the shape I keep coming to at the bottom of the stairs, standing in the grass with its head up, patient, waiting to be counted in, is out there still at the foot of some tower 9 miles from any road, or in here with me, the 18th, the one too many, always the last one, always at the edge of the count, always still. Apple, penny, I have lost the 3rd one again.